Let's get on.
Welcome, my friends and enemies. Glad you are here. We're back with another Grima's Workshop. I think this is part 7, probably. Something like that.
Says 7 up there, so yeah.
I put that because that's what I thought it was.
No, it may feel like
Actually,
700.
More 7,000. His part level is over 7,000. But yes, I am here with Matt Findell, Supreme Herald of Hellrond. How are you doing, Matt Findell? All right, back to you, Joe. Say it. Silent treatment. Sage, how you doing?
Well, I'd say all right, maybe.
Sounds good to me, I suppose.
Nothing particularly interesting happened.
Boring old unknown Sage this week. I see how it is.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So, we have a treat since I told you guys what it was, but you obviously didn't remember, which I don't fault you for. It's not really worth remembering. So, let's jump into it for this week in cringe. So, I'm going to go ahead and just read it out.
It's like a Lovecraftian horror. You can't actually remember it. You know, you watch it, but just like
you've been violated so many times, and you don't even know how many times or how you were violated. But then you have to just remember the fact that you were violated. In fact,
you just remember being violated. You don't remember by what.
Yep. So this one is Robin Reid. Queer atheists, agnostics, and animists. Oh my! Yes, it is as bad as it sounds.
I remember that one from the list. Pretty
sure none of these have any. Yeah, it's the most pronounced one. None of these have anything to do with Tolkien. Just throwing that out there. But I'm going to read. Here's the intro blob. This presentation is part of a larger project that began in 2018 that asks the questions of how fans of J.R.R. Tolkien's Legendarium, who are atheists, agnostics, animists, or part of the New Age movements, interpret his work. Well, they should do it correctly. That's how they should do it. Apparently, that's not how they do it. Apparently. Using a mixed methodology approach, I administered an online survey, because that's going to be a large survey patch, approved by my university institutional review board. Well, it's through a university, so apparently. University institutional review board.
Not great for getting...
averages, Sage. Just average. Asking for basic demographic information and respondents' answers to open-ended questions. I highly doubt that. The questions allowed respondents to describe their beliefs or lack of belief, their experiences with and responses to organized religion. None of this has any relevance to Legendary. I'm just pointing that out. If any, their history of reading and of interpreting Tolkien's work, and their responses to the tendency in popular and academic thought to assume that Tolkien's Christian beliefs must shape readers' interpretation of his work. That's part 1 of 3 of this. I circulated information to groups interested in Tolkien on social media and collected 113 completed surveys between December 1st, 2018, whatever that is, 2018, January 31st, 2019. So basically 2 months. In my first round of analysis, I identified 3 groups based on how they answered the first question. Atheists, who make up 44% of the respondents, agnostics, 30%, and a third group who make up 26%. The third group were those who identified connections to a range of specific religious, spiritual, or philosophical movements, acknowledging the fuzzy boundaries between those concepts. This last group includes animists as well as pagans, polytheists, one nominal Buddhist, one recovering Catholic. I don't even know what the heck recovering Catholic even means. Just means not Catholic, I guess. One deist, as well as humanists and skeptics. It's spelled septics. I don't know why it's spelled septics, but okay.
Indicative of the quality of the work.
Well, she's a professional.
Also, recovering Christian is probably a play on the...
not recovering Christian, recovering Catholic.
That's a term, that's a thing. That was a term that was around like the 70s and 80s.
It's the same thing as like, what is it? Practicing and non-practicing Catholics. It's like, so what you're saying is you're Catholic or you're not Catholic.
It has to do with the whole Catholic guilt thing, like you're recovering from Catholic guilt, you know?
I know, but I'm saying like it's the same along the lines of was it what did I literally just say? Practicing or non-practicing Catholic. And I'm like, if you're a non-practicing Catholic, you're not a Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah, but this
That's-
sounds like a militant.
I'm a non-practicing Catholic because I'm not Catholic. Like, an atheist is a non-practicing Catholic. It's such a silly term. This presentation will focus on how the 34% of the respondents who identified themselves as asexual, bisexual, gay, lesbian, pansexual, or queer, all of those are queer, and their responses to those questions about their experiences with religious institutions. Sorry, Sage, your mic pickup is just catching me off guard. Thank you. To the question about their experiences with religious institutions, their favorite works, what makes Tolkien's work important to them, and how they deal with the assumption that his religious beliefs play a significant role in interpreting his work. Okay, so my first initial thoughts, your opinion of the work literally should not matter. The story was made, and you should just read it and enjoy it as what it is. Any other output. And I'm trying to remember, because there's death of the author and author interpretation. Is those two types? Or am I crazy? Matt, you should know this one.
I don't know. I mean, death of the author certainly sounds like something.
Well, death of the author, I believe, means if it's not in the canon, it doesn't exist. If I'm correct. I want to look that up real quick just to
Yeah, I am, because that's not what.
No, it's that the author's intent doesn't matter.
Oh yeah. Oh, okay, yeah. That's not so much the canon, yeah, but that has to do with the canonicity. It's just that that's always a thing though, where the readers interpret. That's that whole implied versus act intent, meaning I always had this thing where there's no such thing as implication. That's all in your own head. You know what I mean? So that's what
everything's always in your head.
Your interpretation is something you're seeing that implied, or whatever.
Does not make it less real, though.
So, death of the author.
My view, I don't know the name of it off the top of my head, but my view has always been what's in the content is what the content is. The canon is the work. Everything outside can only clarify. Like for Robert Jordan, he can clarify a situation if somebody's confused about it, but the ultimate actual answer, it has to align with what's in the canon. But things like Harry Potter with J.K. Rowling, if she's like, Dumbledore is gay. Well, nowhere in the books does it say Dumbledore is gay. She had to clarify based off of certain things. And it's like, whatever. And then she, like later on, she's like, oh, Hermione's black. I'm like, why didn't you put that in?
No.
That you can't just say it afterwards, and then
but also
that's the way it is.
It contradicts actual canon.
But that's the thing, is that if you believe it's the interpretation aspect, it doesn't matter what the canon says. But it's also the same people who talk about comic books and stuff like that. They'll have this tendency to be like, well, see, don't you know that Robin's gay? And they're like, but is he though? No, he is, because look at this last comic.
Well,
I'm like, yes, written by
yes, of course.
It's written by a different author. It's written by a different person who owned a different portion of this franchise at a different time period.
Well, okay,
like it's so fragmented that, like, because you own the IP means you have the right to change the canon, which I don't agree with. I get that you can legally change it, but I don't agree with that's what makes it canon. Like Star Wars, when Disney buys it and then they just chuck the EU, it's like, but the EU had been around for forever and was all lined up with the actual original.
There's a whole can of worms there. Like, let that be a whole video for itself.
Well, yeah, I was just I'm pointing out, like, when it comes to somebody's
fan stuff, right?
The EU is mostly fan stuff, but that's where, like, the books and everything, which were based. Well, no, because they were approved by George Lucas.
So
like the books and everything, comics and all that stuff were approved.
The old EU had 4 levels, okay, in Star Wars. There was G canon, S canon, and 2 others I don't remember the letter for. G canon stood for George canon, which was all the movies plus George's interviews and George's word of George, so to speak, right?
Mm-hmm. And some of them were alternate timelines and stuff like that, but they were all consistent.
Was all the novels and such that Lucas approved. Meaning,
in
other words, there are novels he didn't approve, which were not in S canon. There were comics he didn't approve, which would be lower tier as well, right? Mm-hmm. So and that's how you resolve conflict. So if something happened in a comic that something the novel or the movies conflicted with, they overrode the comic. if something happened in the movie that the novel, or even if George approved the novel, let's say a later movie made that irrelevant, that item can that
Well,
was
it's if there's a conflict, you go with the original canon line, and then you just move it to an alternate line. Like if something else had happened, like if the Emperor hadn't gotten killed in Return of the
well,
Jedi,
I'm just telling you,
and it went somewhere else.
the way Lucas canon, because their canon policy was on their website,
Yeah.
for up until Disney ruined it, and then
Yeah. But that's what I'm saying is like it'd be the type of thing where if something is one thing and somebody else buys the IP, they can't just change what it means.
Well,
like Fallout,
okay.
what's the
So-
Fallout thing right now where they're like, it's destroying New Vegas and the lore behind New Vegas, and New Vegas is the most popular one of the Fallout the game series. So it's like, okay, well, if the current one is screwing with that, then obviously
Okay, so
it won't line up.
But then you're confused. See, this is where we get complicated. Okay, and not to get say. So there's canon, and then there's original. Like, so the way see when we talk, and this comes from all the versus forums online, which is like when you have a versus battle, like in a forum where, like, let's say it's Captain Kirk versus Captain Picard or whatever, right? So if
They both
the
die.
default for most places is canon is what the owner says.
So
it
are
is.
they fighting, or is this just a comparison?
Well, I'm just giving you a generic, like
Compared to stats, victories, it could literally be anything.
Yeah.
It's just
So
it's like which one's the better one.
The default for what is canon is what the owner says is canon, unless the OP who starts the thread says we're going to use the Star Trek AU for both of them, or we're only going to count this series of novels for this guy and this series for that guy, but other, like something like that. So, and the purpose of that and holding that rule is in debate forums is so you can have an actual debate with the same set of information. It's
yeah, you usually qualify it by something, but
like how you can't debate creationists because they have their own interpretation of the laws of physics.
That's a whole lot of subcategories. We're not going to get into that can of worms.
No,
we're never going to get done.
They understood exactly what I said because he's probably debated the same idiots over the years I've debated on this sort of thing.
Well, yes,
I
but again,
debate those things. So, yeah.
The problem is there are so many subcategories in that area, like whether it be creationists, evolutionists, whatever. Like, there's not just one evolutionist camp. There's
no, I'm talking about the ones who
subdivisions.
go like, well, gravity doesn't exist, or those type of people.
Or the young Earth.
I mean, the effects of gravity exist.
No, the
particles.
YouTube doesn't have these videos anymore because they're considered misinformation. So you got to look on Rumble or whatever.
Again, it's not going to be anything related to this video. My point was to do with what the intro for Robin Reid's thing was essentially saying that there's the death of the author or whatever. I stick to whatever the canon is, and the author is allowed to clarify but not add. If it's not in the original work that they wrote, they did not intend for it to be part of that thing. Exactly. They should have added it originally. That's how I stand. I know not everybody likes that. Not everybody agrees with that. That's fine. But if I'm having a conversation about Wheel of Time, Lord of the Rings, some other thing, I mean, if I ever read Harry Potter, I'll apply it the same way to Harry Potter. You can't just throw in like, oh, this is like, oh, Harry Potter had a machine gun. That's how he got rid of Voldemort. Like, you can't do that. So when comics do it, I disagree with it.
It's fan fiction.
I mean, yeah, but a lot shorter series, but
but you gotta.
I mean, why they don't use wands like machine guns, I don't know. But whatever.
Comic books, you can't count them the way you count like Lord of the Rings or
but what I'm saying is that just because somebody buys the IP does not mean you can destroy the timeline, because then whatever they destroy is no longer canon because they're picking and choosing whatever they want.
No, but they can't destroy the timeline because the previous product exists. It's just separate.
Well, if they conflict, yes. But like if Superman's always like truth, justice, and the American way, and all of a sudden he's like pro-Nazi, it won't fit. It just doesn't fit because it's counter to his beliefs and his entire core of his being. And so trying to squish that in,
you just consider it a separate continuity in comic terms.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is like when that comes out and people are like, this isn't Superman, they're like, but it is because they own the IP. They start drooling out of their mouth.
Well,
like
you just ignore those morons.
Well, I know, but that's my point. Is that like then to say that's not what that is. Same thing with like the Games Workshop nonsense that's going on. It's like that's not Warhammer 40K. It's not, because the lore itself has dictated it. There's 70 plus some books in Warhammer. There's freaking so many lore type stuff that they have on top of that, the codexes and everything like that. They're not even going to make female space marines or female whatever the high tier guys are, the bodyguards to the emperor.
I think it's the Astartes Custodes.
Yeah, the Custodes. Like, they're not even going to make them miniatures. They're just literally saying lore because reasons. And it's like, nobody's going to buy them. But there's plenty of females that you can play. The Sisters of Battle, who I personally like. The Sisters of Silence. There's a whole bunch of different ones. I think they had like a picture, a diagram of all these different factions. And all but like 2 of them.
No, my mistake. It's the
have males.
Adeptus Custodes.
Adeptus Custodes. Thank you. The Custodes, regardless. But like, out of all of these things, like 2 or 3 factions out of all the factions under the Imperium of Man have women in them. Only 3 or so of them didn't have women because, like, Space Marines are all men, Adeptus Custodes, all men, and then I think there's 1 more that was all men. But aside from that, everyone else, and then you have 2 of them at least that are only women, Sisters of Battle and Sisters of Silence. And it's like, you have your representation. They want to ruin it for their own reasons. And I was like, that's not canon.
Enough.
Yeah. Well, it's not. But my point is like, that's the way I view things is going to be based upon, I care about what Tolkien actually wrote. And if he sells me through his letters or something that's saying, this is not an allegory for Christianity, this is not this, I hate allegory in all its form, in relation to his work. Make that clear. It's in relation to his work. You can't be like, he hates allegory, and then be like, allegory in Tolkien's work. It's like, that's not how that works, guys. You can't just be like applying it, saying that this applies.
Video.
So, this is Robin Reid. I apologize in advance.
I could have predicted that hairstyle a mile away.
Oh, I also have to
I'm
turn
just surprised
on
it's
sound.
not blue.
I mean, it's one of those things where you could just know them by what they look like. So it's very weird how you could like look at somebody and be like, yep, I know all of their ideologies just looking at them. So here we go.
Okay, thank you so much. I'd like to
It might be
thank
cool.
you
Also a specific subset.
for all the work
of
that you did, as well
There
as
you go.
everyone else in the Tolkien Society, to create the first event to focus on diversity and to deal with those who oppose and wish to cancel any discussion of alterity and diversity.
And for those who wish to cancel, as like they cancel everybody who doesn't agree with them.
And what's ashamed is the Tolkien Society of America was the first Tolkien fan group in the world.
Well, when people infiltrate, that's what happens. This is what happens when you don't gatekeep. Just like to point that out.
In Tolkien studies. One accusation
Which is funny, because you can gatekeep and not let them spew nonsense while letting them participate in enjoyment of Tolkien stuff. It is possible. Like the types of gatekeeping. One is saying, no, you can't change anything. No, you can't push change on anybody. You have to accept the work as it is, but anybody can still enjoy it, versus letting anybody just come in and say whatever they want. Those are the 2 different things.
Mm-hmm. That was made about the 16 amazing presenters is that we are projecting ourselves on Tolkien or his work and ignore.
You are. Quite literally. That's this entire seminar, all 15, 16 seminars, literally is what it is.
Ignoring his intent. My paper is based on the idea that all readers project ourselves as we read.
It's not whether they do or do not. It's whether they should or should not.
No. Let's nuance this, okay? It's totally acceptable in your private headspace to do that. And if you want to write this paper and say this is my projection, I'm okay with that. Okay,
This is how I perceive this. It's fine.
Yes.
But if you're saying this is how it is, that's a totally different thing.
Correct. That's where you get.
You're now projecting onto what Tolkien was actually meaning to do.
They're altering what he meant.
Yeah, which is not something I allow at all.
Although I would say that all readers read through the lenses of our.
I would also like to point out the whole reading interpretation thing is totally a modern Western concept. It's totally a Western concept.
It is true that when you read something, you interpret it the way you do, right? Which is, of course,
yes,
based on your experience and such.
In olden times, if you were to hear a story, like let's say King Arthur and Excalibur or something like that, you didn't say, oh, here's all these things. No. You were like, here's a story about somebody, and I'm going to listen to their deeds and their challenges and their grandiose whatever they did. Like, that's what you did. You didn't say I'm King Arthur. No, or I can relate to King
Well,
Arthur.
no,
No.
people like little kids pretended to play King Arthur in the
Well,
night.
they
and,
would,
you know,
they would pretend to be the character they heard about. But I'm saying, like, when you heard a story, you were hearing a story about somebody or something else, and that's what you were hearing about someone's exploits. Like, this character
I
went
think
off.
it's not necessarily true that people back in the day didn't relate to the
I'm
character
talking
on a
like
personal level,
ancient
right?
times per se.
No,
I'm
but
not like in recent.
humanity hasn't really changed all that
It
much.
really has. Have you looked at the cultures and customs of the last 10,000
The cultures and customs, sure,
quite
but
different?
the nature of humanity has not.
Well, but people being like going to a play, they're hearing a story, they're being engrossed into or pulled into the story.
Yeah, but stories,
but people did
by
that.
their very
that's-
nature, resonate because there is a relation.
Yes, but they resonate not with skin color or gender sex stuff. They
No, of
they
course not.
resonate with bravery,
But
courageous.
that's still also not the case.
Well, no, I mean,
nowadays.
there were like, you know, so go back into caveman times, right? All they would the based on what
We
we know,
thump our women on the head, yeah.
well, because caveman times are like tribal behavior, basically.
You
They
don't have to
would
go
tell
that far back to tribal, but yeah.
all they no, I'm saying it's probably similar to how tribal behavior is. You know, it's just with less
Oh, yeah.
words. You know,
Yeah.
all they would do is tell
that's-
stories because that's all they could do. You know,
Yeah.
like you out hunting, you out gathering, or you huddle around the fire looking off of bears telling stories, and your
Yeah,
stories would be how your superiors were superior.
But if you sat down with the kids, like think of like in the Lord of the Rings, in Fellowship of the Ring, the movies, Bilbo's telling the monstrous trolls story to the little kids, right? We all know Peter Jackson's kids are in there and everything like that. Well, he's telling them the story. They're infatuated with the story. They're not going, oh, what he really means is they're like listening to the story and consuming it, and then they would go off and tell their friends, or they would be
sure.
part of the story.
What
the thing is how they do
it, but they might interpret it differently based on their situation, environment, etc.
Potentially, but that's literally impossible to know. But we do know when they turn around with oral tradition and they told the story, they told it as it was, or they explicitly said this is how I remember it, and then they told it that way, and then you compare it to somebody else, and that's how you got like kind of like the lined up stuff. What I'm saying is that when somebody comes up and says, well, this is how I interpreted it, and it's just like, but your interpretation literally doesn't matter because the interpretation is what the author stated.
Well, there weren't authors back then. There was just like the shaman.
Well, the author was the person who told the story. Like,
but they would say they heard it from someone else, and they heard it like you know, that's what all tradition is. There was no authors. There was just the information just got passed
the
along.
person who started it was technically the author. Whether they remembered them or not, that's a different story. But I mean, it could go back the line or whatever. I'm just saying that like you can't just say, oh, this is how I interpreted the story. It's like, but if it's open to interpretation, like they just said, the person did the thing.
I do want to. I'm not defending this stupid person. I just want to make a point. She is allowed to have this opinion and express most of this. What we're going to agree
your own personal headspace. Yes, I'm saying
even in a presentation, I'm okay with that. What I'm not okay with is them saying Tolkien intended that, and that's why I draw the freaking line. You know?
Well, yeah, you cannot determine what the author intended it to be because
other than what he wrote. Basically,
well, unless he specifically says, "Oh, this is what I intended."
Well, yes, but again, like I said previously, clarification is something like this is what I intended because this, and this, and thus this. Not, by the way, throwing some random other aspects into the work that wasn't there originally.
Yeah, no, of course.
Yeah.
Personal experiences, and our interpretations are shaped by that. Since, as others have noted,
I'm sure we'll hear a lot of crazy interpretations, so we'll get to that as well.
But like most of these things, it's based on a slight little bit of truth. In this case, everyone interprets stuff differently, and then they run with it to massive extremes that, of course, don't represent anything remotely realistic.
Yes, and I do agree that people interpret things differently. But I also disagree with somebody being like, I interpreted it this way, therefore that's what the canon is. That's what I disagree with.
Yeah, everyone does that.
No?
Well, okay, sane people do.
Well, sane people look at it and say, "This is what I gathered from him saying it, not that's what he intended." Like those are two different things. Like me saying, "This is how I understood the author's intent," or whatever, or through what he wrote. Like he wrote this, and that this is what I gathered. That's one thing, because you can compare it to other people's and then say, "Okay, well, according to the actual work, this is what X means." When you're just saying, "Oh, all these people have these different things that have literally nothing," like that's way out there meanings, so totally different thing. So
Tolkien is on record as, quote, preferring history with its applicability to the thought and experience of readers over allegory, because applicability resides in the freedom of the reader. I think his intent was that readers should have freedom.
So now she's imposing intent, and I don't like that. Because, like, I can.
She also specifically says, "I think this is the case,"
yes,
rather than "this was definitely the case."
This entire thing is, I think, but in favor of a specific thing.
Yeah, sure. At least I suppose we can give her credit for not definitely stating this has to be the way it is to be interpreted.
So far.
So far, that's true. We're only 1 minute in.
There's still daylight. Hold on, my dog.
To apply our thoughts and experiences to his story. This presentation is part of a larger project which I began in 2018. My question then was how fans of J.R.R. Tolkien's Legendarium, who are atheists, agnostics, animists, or part of other New Age spiritual movements, might interpret his work, especially in the context of the religious political conflicts of the second decade of the 21st century. Today, I'm talking just about...
Her camera bouncing is really a distracting.
His work is not allegorical, so there's no interpreting his work in light of conflicts of what she said.
That's what you haven't figured out yet, is that every single one of these things, they're all like, this is compared to X. It's literally them comparing everything to allegory, which he said doesn't exist.
Well, he didn't say it doesn't exist.
He said he hated it.
He said, yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm saying in terms of he did not create it to be compared as allegory. So when they're like, this is allegorical, it doesn't exist. You can apply it to it if you want to in your brain, but that doesn't mean it's true. It means it's actually false, because he said himself, it's not part of that. It has nothing to do with that. That's what I'm saying.
About how the queer atheists, agnostics, and animists...
Because queer atheists and regular atheists, I guess. So strange versus not strange atheists. Different outcomes, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, one's strange, the other not, right?
To be fair, to J.R.R. Tolkien, they're both strange. That's a different story.
To my survey, ages 18 to 64 engage with Tolkien's Legendarium.
It's Nintendo 64. Get it right. Sheesh.
So I plan to speak for only about 15 minutes to have time for questions.
Lies.
The handout I sent
that could be 15 minutes of questions.
Project, the results of my analysis, and key quotes from my online survey. I am not going to read the quotes. Instead, I will summarize my analysis.
I'll read the quotes. Don't worry. If she posts them, I'll be specific on that.
Analysis and allow you to read and think about what my respondents said at your leisure. And of course, I am always...
So I'm free to interpret them incorrectly, just like you guys do for Tolkien. Sorry.
Always happy to talk more about it with people by email. Number one, figures, but what did he really mean? The first item on your handout is a 2-paragraph excerpt from an essay.
Oh no, she's not even going to do presentations. She's just going to say it. The whole thing.
She's reading an essay. She's literally reading an essay.
But you didn't have a presentation. That's what I'm saying. No presentation. I'm assuming there's no presentation.
She says she's reading an essay.
Oh, no. Well, yes, but normally they read the essay and show you stuff on screen. I guess I can't.
Can we just do sound? Or
I'll do presentation to go with her. Or better yet.
we'll mime the whole thing. Oh, that'd be great.
Would it though?
I mean, our miming would be the best part about the presentation.
Fair enough.
Berlin here, that I consider to be the single best essay on the topic of Tolkien and religion that has been published so far. She argues that Tolkien's own contradictory statements in his fiction, nonfiction, and letters created the opportunity for oppositional readings about Tolkien and religion to flourish.
But there's the main canon, and then there's everything that didn't make it into the main canon, and this is pretty well known, I'm sure.
So apparently this person she's quoting, I'm guessing, took when Tolkien changed his mind on stuff as being conflicting when it's actually a corrective action. But anyway,
it's your first rough draft compared to your second rough draft. It's like they're not conflicting; they're literally different on purpose because he decides to do.
But that person is seizing on that difference to find for their interpretation or whatever, and why they could do that, but they're wrong.
You could be wrong. It's all good. You could be wrong.
Both Christian and neo-pagan fans claiming the work and the author as a messenger for their beliefs.
That shouldn't be applied by anyone, Christian or otherwise, because it's not applicable. Okay, moving on.
She reminds us, however, that The Lord of the Rings is, quote, a book from which readers have been taking what they want and need for 60 years, and that they show no sign of stopping.
That's fine, as long as they're not saying what that they took from it is canon. Okay, moving on.
End of quote. I believe her argument extends to how readers engage with all of Tolkien's legendarium, and in this project, bring what actual readers take, want, and need from his work related in their own accounts. So what was this survey? The second item on your handout describes my survey and research.
I really wish I had this handout. I really do.
Yeah, it could have been useful.
Yeah, well, apparently it was only given to the Tolkien Society members and not everybody that they just bring it up to. But a slideshow would have helped. Presentation, maybe? Like, I actually see what the crap you're talking about. That'd be helpful.
It was reviewed and approved by the Texas A&M Commerce University's Institutional Review Board, which functions to protect the rights of human subjects in research.
Literally means nothing. Just stating that.
I collected
is this relevant to the interpretation of the book?
She's saying that she went through a university to do this poll, essentially. And thus,
okay, the survey has to comply with the ethics regulations. Or
yeah,
I guess. I mean, I don't know how unethical you get when you poll people, but whatever.
Well, no, when you do a study and you be in the ages of the university,
social sciences.
Well, I mean,
primarily.
There are versions of it in the U.S. for hard sciences too. Basically, like you're doing biological research or whatever,
But if I'm like, hey, I'm doing a survey on your opinion, it's just like none of it matters at that point.
Yeah, no, but you need to have the ethics rules so that you don't use the information you gain.
Yeah, they want you to not exploit human beings in your research, basically.
Ideal, yeah.
Or I would say criminally exploit people, because technically, even buying bread is exploiting someone. So
Is it?
Okay. Is it? I don't think so.
But it depends on your definition of exploiting.
There's that, yeah.
Surveys. But for today's talk, I am focusing on the responses from the 34%, who identify themselves as variously asexual, bisexual, gay, lesbian, pansexual, or queer.
Wait, whoa. Let's go back. That's 34%.
I would like to be pansexual to every form of death available at this point.
Well, that's 34% of our base, I guess. Other people.
I suppose if you go to university, the percentage goes up high.
I think it was. I'm trying to remember if she actually stated how many people she actually polled. I think it was like 110 people. So 34% of that 110.
But
would
like
be,
in the general
And she-
population,
and she didn't normalize
according
like
to
so.
UK surveys,
Well, she did, but she didn't normalize her survey
it's
base to the
roughly
population base.
3% if you include also the non-binary
But yeah, Sage,
qualifiers, right?
yes, but what she didn't do was normalize. Like she got. Let's say she gets that 30% queer or whatever. She didn't say, "Well, only 3%. Well, I'm only going to take 3% of those because that's 3% of the population." She wasn't normalizing her data set to the population demographic.
Yeah, no, of course, but that's because of the
because
bias.
she wants a weighted result in her favor, basically.
Could be, yeah.
are you implying she's pulling a scientism?
Well, I'm saying directly, she has bad.
I mean, it's a social science thing, right?
Well, scientism is when you're rigging the data to get your desired
Okay.
outcome.
But
I get that, but this is very prevalent in the social sciences.
I will say though, she said she's presenting an essay, which
This
is
is
a
why we
means
have
of
the
presenting your
replication
personal
crisis.
opinion. So she's not. This isn't her study per se. This is an essay based on the study. So
A very small
No,
study.
it's only a survey, which I don't think you can call a study. But
well, I mean,
110 people is hardly a study.
I'm being
in my
as capricious. Is that the word?
I don't know, maybe.
I'm trying to be fair to her in the sense that
I was gonna say you're being as Capri's son as you possibly can towards her.
well, I'm trying to be fair to her because I'm better than her. So there you go.
Ah, we have fixed the internet.
Do I really mean by queer?
Strange. That is
That's
the proper
an excellent question,
interpretation,
actually.
especially
I'd
in
like
Tolkien
someone
work.
to define that in, of course, not the usual sense.
Not in the modern sense.
If I were gay, I would
No,
be offended
just,
at being called queer. I'd be
whenever
saying I'm
you- yeah,
homosexual
exactly.
or maybe gay. That'd be about
Mhm.
it, you know.
Well,
But
I
like,
mean,
if you go into the literature, it's usually defined as let's see, what is it again? No, that's the Old English. Nowadays, it means
LGBTQ plus.
no, well, sort of, but it's an identity without an essence. I think is the phrase used a lot.
You need identity without substance.
Yeah.
Yes, that's what it. But the
Let
thing
me,
is,
look it up.
I was applying the original language of queer being strange or weird or whatever, and applying that to what she says. So let me clarify on what it means. I'm like, this is what it means. That's what you should be meaning it by, because that's what Tolkien meant it by. But of course, people going, this is the whole thing. The reason I brought up earlier about like what people think it means versus what it means, because you'll completely miss the point of the story if you just start changing the meanings.
Okay, so what Google tells me is that
Not biased
it's
at all.
probably accurate, but it's usually defined as whatever is at odds with the normal, the legitimate, the dominant. There is nothing in particular to which it necessarily refers, right? It is an identity without
So strange, weird, awkward, all those kind of things. Yeah, like basically the original meaning of the word. Yes.
So it doesn't actually mean anything. You just apply it to yourself if you're in opposition to say the normal.
We also call that strange, weird, awkward. Anyway.
The third item on your handout is a quote from Alexander Doty's film monograph, Flaming Classics, Queering the Film Canon, where he lists 6 different definitions of queer or queerness that he has found in.
I mean, why didn't he add the 800,000 other definitions that people could literally just make up whenever they feel like it? Like, they're not even trying to apply it the way Tolkien would have applied it in his time period, because they're like, here's the modern definition. I'm going to take that modern definition and stamp it onto every definition it's used in the book.
I think we're overreading into what she's doing a little bit. Like, she's just saying she surveyed these people. Maybe she does have an opinion similar to theirs, granted, which is why I'm annoyed by her. But these people, she's just surveying what people personally interpret in Tolkien as. Now, again, I'm okay with that. She did that. And I'm okay with their opinions on that stuff, even if they're wrong. What I get annoyed by is some of her comments about when someone says that there were conflicts in Tolkien's own writing, she as the neutral observer should say, no, Tolkien was just correcting his prior work. She doesn't do that, so she's no longer objective, she's now biased.
She's not clarifying the information that people are giving in, like, oh, they said this, but this is what it actually is, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Queer theory and scholarship. The definition that best fits the work I'm doing in this presentation is 2A, an umbrella term.
But this isn't a presentation. This is literally an essay. That's it.
What? I guess it's a presentation now, right?
I mean, she's presenting it, so maybe.
It's missing literally everything about a presentation, namely the presentation.
I mean, it's not a necessary part.
This is more of an audiobook of an essay than it is anything else.
Pulled together lesbian.
Maybe she's like a live PowerPoint. She thinks her face is like PowerPoint.
I'd like to read the actual stuff she's talking about because I can't talk about anything she's saying because she's not even talking about what she's saying. So I don't know, freaking know, whatever.
Or bisexual with little or no attention to differences, similar to certain uses of gay to mean lesbians, gay men, bisexuals, transsexuals, and transgendered people. As table number 1 shows, about 70% of my respondents are bisexual and or pansexual, with the remaining 30% being asexual, gay, lesbian, or queer.
Right. A term that can direct attention to identity without solidifying it.
A lot of things. Lots of things.
This item on your handout summarizes the demographic information. Table 2 shows that the 38 respondents ranged in age from 18 to 64 years, with the majority of them, 60%, being in their 20s or 30s. Table 3 covers gender. 60% are women, with the remaining 40% being...
Go ahead.
Look at what I just linked in the Twitter post, what High King Fëanor just posted on Twitter.
I mean, where's the lie? I mean, that's about as accurate to Rings of Power as one can get.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh, this is great. Yes.
Mordor's refugees share their heartbreaking story of violence. That's so cold.
I mean, that's the same line of thinking. I almost said reasoning, but I corrected my mistake before I said it. Line of thinking that these people are doing in this. So, oh no. Here we go. 1 second.
Agender, male, or non-binary. These tables were relatively straightforward to pull together. Things became much more complicated with the political identification because, of course, what is considered conservative, centrist, liberal not only differs from country to country, sometimes within regions of the same country, it also changes over time. So for now, I simply group.
And ironically, it is not relevant to Tolkien's work. But whatever.
The response for nationality.
I'm going to bet my bottom dollar that 90% of people who responded to our survey at best read the Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit and maybe watched Rings of Prime. That's about it.
Probably.
Ethnicity, and political identity into one table, number 4. Generally, 58% of the respondents are American, with the remaining 42% coming from a number of other countries. The vast majority.
How much do I bet most of them from Europe?
Majority are white.
Shocking. A guy who's white in Britain, which is white, in the continent of white people, plus a massive country, majority of white people that enjoy the white-based.
But wait, I thought Britain was built by black people. Stonehenge in particular.
I mean, it was. Then they all just screwed off to Africa because reasons. Also, I love this because of like we can't relate to it. Is their whole argument, but then they're shocked when people are vastly, overwhelmingly of a multi-ethnic background, other than European descent, and it's like, you guys are pushing this and then are surprised that that's the way it is. But then
Almost the
it's not-
entire idea is nonsense.
then it's not even that case. Like, there's people all over the globe that freaking love Tolkien and his work. Like, that's why it's so freaking popular. Like, I don't. They can't even make up their own minds.
Perhaps because of flaws in my research process, perhaps because of Black, Indigenous, and people of color's well-founded distrust of white academics.
Just wait until she finds out who the indigenous people of Europe are. Might be disappointed.
Data gathering, or possibly those as well as other factors. I'm needing to do research in political science for what the political labels and terminology actually mean. But although Doty argues that none of the definitions of queer allow the assumption of a radical...
So how far into this are we? 6 minutes, and she's gotten to maybe half of one of her respondents.
But it's even funny, though, is because it feels like it's been 30 years. I'm looking at him like, there's no freaking way that's as far as...
This is like what we talked about with the last one, where there's also been, in the appendices, I explained the methodology of my survey or whatever, you know. In the appendix B, I explained the political research or whatever. So people can look that up for their identification. This should be out presenting information. And I don't know. I mean, I remember learning from the Jesuits how to do presentations, and this is, you know, fairly simple. I guess, maybe they went to a school where they don't teach them this stuff. I don't know.
I just love the fact that, like, we've let this video run more than probably any of our other videos, and it still feels like it's been like we've gone through the presentation 10 times, and it's only 6 minutes into the 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Like, I don't understand how time has stopped flowing.
even liberal position on gender, sexuality, or other issues. It's true that the majority on almost all...
I'm going to just call it now, since I have not watched this before. This entire thing is going to be a giant nothing burger that has absolutely nothing to do with anything, just like the previous.
Well, you mean like all of the rest? Wow.
Well,
Basically,
Well,
they're going to say something and then not cover that same thing. And then they're going to ask the questions. It's not going to have anything to do with their answers.
the one with Hellrond had great comedic value, I will admit.
Sure,
Well,
but it also didn't really contain anything of substance.
Well, none of them do.
Other than Hellrond and Heavenrond. That was the substance.
I mean, none of them have substance. We know.
Yeah, to be fair, Heavenrond was one of our creations.
If there's a Hellrond, there has to be a Heavenrond. I mean,
Yeah.
can't have a crooked line without a straight line. C.S. Lewis.
We witnessed Hellrond, and our despair cried out, and Heavenrond came to us and saved us.
Came to our aid.
Yes.
Yes. We're probably going to need Heavenrond after this Hellrond of a show.
These
Probably,
respondents identify as being left of centrist in various ways. But I did not
So why
assume that
did you not
all
add any rights of center people in your survey?
Well, because they're the loony bins, remember?
Are they though?
According to her, probably, yeah.
No, that's fair.
I mean, it's not like there's any bias in this entire presentation because it's considered everything about this presentation is about one particular side.
Huh.
I mean, how many of the people that she has, what percentage of the people that out of the 110, she's got what, 70% of them are bisexual, pansexual, this, that, or the other. How many of
No,
those?
she said 34%.
34% of the people of the 70% or of the 110?
I think it was of the whole survey.
Because there was a 70% somewhere in there. I'm trying to remember what it was. Because again, there's no substance. I'm not sure what to attribute it to. But of that
think,
percentage, how many of them would be center or right of center?
well,
Very low percentage, probably.
given that it's a university study, not that many.
Well, it's a university study. Doesn't mean the people she polled necessarily are university people.
Well, usually it is.
Yeah,
I
usually
mean,
there's
I'm not saying it's not. I'm just saying it's not
It's not necessarily sure, but it's very likely. And
Possible.
also,
it's
it depends on where, of course, which university, right?
Matt, maybe you know. Where's Texas A&M? Is that Houston or is that?
I want to say
Because-
Austin, but I'm going to look it up.
Oh, if that's
Maybe.
Austin, that explains everything.
Austin is
It depends on which university, of course, right? So if you go to
Well,
California,
you can tell by where it's at. If it's in Austin, that explains everything.
yeah, sure. But like, say, go
It's
to
the one
California,
It's the
then
one
you will
blight.
have obviously more left people in the university. If you go
Well,
to, I don't know, some random
it's a
state in
little
the
different
center.
because in Texas, most universities
Well,
aren't
it's
that
in College Station, Texas. The question is, where's College Station?
Like-
Brazos County.
you can usually tell because if it's in a super liberal city, it
Mhm.
explains it. If it's not in a
Yeah,
super liberal city, the university is usually not that bad. It just
Mhm.
depends on which city is it in. And there's only a couple blights.
Well, Texas A&M is huge. It's like one of the top 10 colleges in size.
Yeah, but like its main
know.
campus and everything is going to be. But I mean, they're probably going to have branches. Like most colleges have branches and a bunch of minor small things, but they're not going to be like full buildings. They're going to be like a.
Yeah, so College Station is near Austin, Texas.
Yep. So Austin, that explains everything.
Yeah.
Totally not biased.
as progressive, nor did I put any restrictions for participating in the survey beyond that of being an adult. The fifth item on your handout is an overview of my analysis of the responses to my 8 open-ended questions, which is where things get complex.
Yeah, but if she had put in this entire survey to literally any other place other than Austin, it probably would have had a vastly different outcome because of the type of people who go to this type of places. That's just the nature of it.
Fascinating. I generated the categories in the table by a rhetorical analysis of what the responders said. I read and reread responses, identifying keywords and phrases, and using those to group similar responses together. This process is ongoing. While working on this paper, I found a category I'd not seen in a previous analysis. Please note that all.
How much you want to bet it was the correct one? I've never seen this before. What kind of answer is this? It's the correct one. Don't worry about it.
The quotes from my respondents are reproduced exactly as they typed them into the survey. I did no editing.
It's a shame I can't see these things because there's no presentation.
So, table number 5 covers the responses to the first 2 questions, how they identify and what their beliefs are. I'm organizing this alphabetically and have supplied selected comments for each group below the headers. About 30% of the group are agnostics, another 30% are atheists, while the remaining respondents are animists or belong to a variety of other spiritual groups and movements. Their comments about what these specific categories of identity mean to them in terms of their beliefs or lack of belief show a range of definitions about what the term means for different people. The most complicated one is atheist, and there could be a whole bunch.
I thought animist would be the most complicated one.
I'm trying to remember. Is Animist the one that people believe souls are in everything?
That's the complicated part.
They are, but they aren't.
Yeah.
I mean,
because like Shinto, like everything has.
But there are
spirits,
literally thousands of variations of animism. So,
Yeah.
well, maybe
there's
more.
also thousands of variations of atheism to some extent. But
Yeah, but atheism, you generally have only 2 big categories, right?
probably 2 major ones. Yeah.
2 major.
But-
Yeah. The atheists that just don't do anything with it, and then the militant ones.
The active ones, the activist group. But like, I find it strange because what she's saying is like they had these meanings. I'm like, but again, what you come up with is not the same as what the author is saying. And if the author is saying something and you can't understand because you don't know the words, the terms, then you should probably learn the terms and like the reason like definitions matter. If you don't have the definition, well, then you're going to not understand what they're saying because you'll be. It's like reading a sentence and it's an adverb, but you're reading it like a proper noun. It's like, well, that's going to have an entirely different definition, which means it's going to have an entirely different read through.
Yeah.
And it's going to mean something entirely different. It's like you have to understand what it is, identify it, and say, oh, they're saying that. So when there's like they're dancing gaily, it doesn't mean they're dancing while shoving dicks up their butts. That's not what they're doing. They're dancing happily because that's what it means. That's the literal definition that he uses in those types of things. And it's like, if you don't understand that basic level, then how are you ever going to possibly have any interpretation other than the wrong one? Like, you can have like a slightly off, or maybe like translated a different, like instead of saying daily, you say happily. But we're not translating Tolkien's work into like how they would do biblical translations, where they change the word to whatever the modern context might be. They leave it as the author wrote it, and you're expected to understand the terms and the wording. And it is kind of written Old Englishy. So if you're not familiar with Old Englishy stuff, you might not understand it. But that's why you should go investigate those kind of things. So
Yeah.
The entire purpose of this is saying they had their own viewpoints. So they don't know what they're reading, and then they're going to comment on it, not realizing that they don't know what they're meaning. That just makes sense. But okay.
All those different terms. As someone who is currently an atheist, who was a lukewarm Presbyterian as a
Sage, we're here your keyboard, by the way.
Oh.
Your clippity clappity.
child, and became a
To be fair,
Wiccan.
that's probably more interesting than the actual thing.
I mean, yeah, I was trying to figure out if you're trying to like send an SOS through like Morse code or something.
I don't speak Morse code, so no.
Well, you don't speak Morse code, you tap Morse code, good sir.
Yeah, so I don't speak it.
Neither do I.
And
Either of them, actually.
is now also something of an atheist and an animist. I wanted to know about people.
Of course, this person is an animist.
She's applying literally every possible label to herself, and I'm like, so you don't know what you are. Congratulations.
Experiences with organized religion. Table 6.
What does organized religion have to do with this if allegory isn't a thing? Like, this is not a biblical documentary. It's a freaking
again. She in her world, allegory exists in Tolkien, so you just
yeah, but there's no organized religion in Tolkien's world.
I mean, there is. They worship Morgoth.
No.
Yeah, I remember Sauron was having them.
On Numenor, they're organized around that. But that's
okay, yeah, sure, but that's not.
There is checkmate,
right?
Well,
and do we count?
He's talking about the legendary
worshiping Morgoth, because that's not organized religion. That's devil worship, essentially.
But that's organized devil worship.
Because as a pagan friend of mine once points out, Satan is a Catholic deity. It's like, he's in. He is in the, he's
a participant.
Technically, if you're a Satanist,
he's
you
a
have to be a
deity
Christian
only in the
exist.
dualist faiths.
He wouldn't be a deity in the Christian term.
From the pagan perspective, he's a deity.
Yeah, but
that's not Catholic. Catholic is not
the pagan perspective is disregarded entirely from the Christian perspective.
Well, but the pagan disregarded the Christian perspective. So
yes, but what you said is that in the you said in the Catholic.
I said as a pagan friend of mine pointed out. I didn't say
Catholic deity, but I'm like, he's not a Catholic deity because Catholics only have one deity, and
that's not the point. You're missing the point. I said that the pagan friend of mine said that.
Oh, so he doesn't know anything. I gotcha.
Yeah. Well, he knows from his perspective, Christianity is fictional.
But that's irrelevant. That's irrelevant to what the actual facts.
I understand he would see Satan as a deity, but why would he specifically insist that it's a Catholic deity? If the Catholics
are the ones who kind of
deity.
Remember, the Catholics are the ones who destroyed the pagans in Norway and all that, like burned their shrines and forced them to convert them. Well,
that has nothing to do with what the actual doctrines teach.
So, would say,
if you're not a Catholic, you don't care what Catholic doctrine teaches.
Would pagans see, for example, I don't know, Horus as a Greek deity?
Wasn't Horus
remember?
Yeah, that's the point.
It's going down to what type of pagan are you? Are you
the Greeks don't worship Horus?
Are you a pagan who just follows
like how the Catholics don't worship Satan?
Or are you a pagan who thinks that all the gods are real?
Well, clearly, if Satan is
whether you believe the gods are real or is irrelevant to what the Catholics believe.
You're missing the point. He's stating his opinion as a pagan.
As a pagan, he says
the fictional Christian
Satan is a Catholic deity,
which is categorically false.
that assumes the Catholics worship Satan.
Or even treat him as a deity. They treat him as a spiritual being. They don't treat him as a deity.
To him, Christianity is just as a form of mythology.
That's fine. That has no bearing on the thing. But if he's saying
that would be like saying,
"Oh, deity," but he's not a deity. He's a spiritual.
Satyrs, for example, are Greek deities. You could argue maybe they are, but it's not really a deity.
All Greek deities are Satanists. But yeah. But I mean, what I'm saying is that what the Catholics teach, like who they actually worship, which is only one deity. Everybody else can be a spiritual being, but it cannot be. So
that
he's
is,
like,
that is correct from the Catholic point of view.
I know, but if he's commenting on Catholic beliefs,
he's commenting on he's commenting on the pagan interpretation of Catholic beliefs.
So he can be incorrect.
And the Catholics can be correct.
Of course he can be incorrect.
Your opinion is the opinion of his group of Norse. He's I guess you would say a Norse revivalist.
Yeah, I mean,
but even if he is, that's fine. But my point is that if you're not going to be charitable to someone's beliefs, then obviously you can't expect the charity.
But why does Satan get
I don't. Okay, I don't want. This is a whole side topic, but if there's one group of people who don't have to be charitable to what Christians believe, it's the Norse, the people in Scandinavia who very forcibly had their culture stripped away by Christian culture. To the point where they would literally burn Norse temples to the ground and build churches on top of them.
That's not Christian.
Burn down the Germanic
using Christian culture. There's a very big difference. Nothing in Christianity doctrine says to go do that. Not
Again,
a single
that's your and my modern interpretation of it.
That
is not the historical reality that these people experience.
No, I said accuracy. I didn't say reality. I said accuracy.
See,
but
maybe
the
Germans might have a point, but the Scandinavians not so much. A
lot of the Scandinavians, if I recall, actually willingly transferred.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, because most peasants willingly transfer because Christianity was legitimately a better religion. That's objectively true.
Yeah, but the Norse people
forcibly put into it.
They the Norse pagans. They don't really have that much of a leg to stand on in regards to.
I'm not.
Especially if they have a leg missing. That's what's restoring.
Oh, well, that's also true.
Yeah. I'm not again.
The Germans, however, they have a point.
Religion to almost every
and also the Slavic pagans. They also.
You've been playing too much Crusader Kings 3, good sir.
No. The Slavic pagans, they got the whole Teutonic Crusades against them.
He doesn't have a whole lot of time. Let's get going.
I only have 6 minutes left, so let's.
Well, geez, we're not going to get very far.
Shows that 40% had negative experiences.
In 6 minutes, we'll still be talking about the same topic right now. We could skip 6 minutes right now and have nothing different. Yeah, it's been 8.5 minutes of nothing. And remember, 15 minutes is her presentation.
Let's skip this then. Let's go.
But the remaining 60% had either neutral or limited experiences, 32%, or positive ones, or a mix of both.
I'm more interested in what they said.
This category here
they haven't said anything.
That showed up early in my analysis of the open-ended responses. It's complicated and needs more work, meaning I need to work on it more. I wanted to know how old they were when they first read Tolkien, or as it turns out, were read Tolkien by a parent, and what their favorite Tolkien works are. All Tolkien fans I know have and love to share their origin stories and talk about their favorites.
Which is fine.
Table 7 shows that half were 8 to 12 years old.
That's actually more interesting than anything else you said so far.
At the time, all reading on their own. A quarter were 4 to 7 years old. This is where some were read to first by a parent, and the remaining quarter were in their teens, with the oldest reported reading age being 20. While I only asked what age they were, a number took advantage of my open-ended question format to share details about their first reading as well as later ones. Table 8 covers their favorites of Tolkien's work, most listed 2, with some going as high as 8 or 9, which makes coding and counting the results a challenge. At this stage, I'm only identifying the first, second, and third items from responses.
Can someone remind me what the point of the survey was?
How queer, atheists, agnostics, and animists
And you're like, wait a minute, what? There's a point to this?
interpret Tolkien's work.
I mean, maybe that got mentioned in the beginning, but no, I don't actually recall.
She hasn't gone. I said this before. Everything she's going over should be refer to Appendix C for this data. Refer to Appendix B for this data.
Mhm.
She should be presenting our findings,
I'm
not
going
our
to
data.
assume it was just like, oh, let's do a survey. And
Well,
then
I feel
maybe
like I'm getting a 15-minute
Why
presentation
not?
about how she got the data, not what the data actually says.
Well,
Mhm.
again,
Well,
when you do
no.
a
First, you need to
presentation,
say why do the data. Then
When
you
you do
go
a
over your
presentation-
methods, right, which is how to gather the data.
I
And
get
then
that, but
after all of that has been discussed, you go to the results.
well, I'm saying like, okay, you could cover all of that in like 2 minutes, and be like, I got this. I was looking for this kind of a data to see if I have it compared to this, blah 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 blah. I put it together. Here's what I found. That's
yes,
what
your
what?
presentation should
No.
be your findings, and you at the beginning you'll say, I use the following general methodology as detailed in Appendix A. Then say, I gather the following data as a detailed in Appendix B. And then maybe you'll quote specific bits of data at various points. But you won't do what she's doing, which is like reading her Excel spreadsheet to us, basically.
Yeah, well, she's reading the introduction, but the whole presentation is the introduction. I don't need
Well,
to step
that
by
we've
step
seen in
way
minutes.
because none of it's relevant. She should easily and this is why if she had a presentation, she could have posted all that data like spreadsheet stuff on the screen, and we could have just said, refer to this slide if
And
you are
just
interested
throw
in
in
this.
some nice percentage graphs, right?
Well, like for example, the last
charts.
lady, what I can't remember the last lady's name, Sunadadra, whatever, the Indian lady.
Something Indian, yeah.
Yeah, but it's like she at least posted sources and stuff at the end of her thing. I was like, good on her. Almost nobody else has done that and all these other things. It's like, just post it so that you can talk about the things that are actually matter, and we can refer to these other things later on if we want to. Nobody's going to refer to her findings because it's so freaking scattered. She's
Okay, so I have no idea how to pronounce it, but the name of the previous one was, I think, Sonali Chinotka, or
you mean that person?
or however you pronounce it.
It's almost as bad as my last name. So there we go.
I've given individual text a number to use for tracking, and I realized I need to expand that because while the Silmarillion and the Lord of the Rings are sort of...
We don't really care about those minor details.
Yeah.
In competition for the top spot, some responses identify a specific chapter from the Silmarillion, others a specific volume of the trilogy.
But what was the question? I want to know the question.
I'm hitting my hard stop because I gotta lay down for half an hour before the other show. So,
well, thanks for hanging out.
That's fair.
Yeah, give me an hour of agita, and hopefully it'll go away. So.
Aside from that, I also have a time limit today.
Well,
I can go another hour, so hopefully that's enough.
Hopefully.
Probably not.
Hopefully you guys will not stroke out while I'm away. So.
At this point, I'm going to have a heart at the rate we're going. So
be safe, everyone. Right. Be safe.
Well, thank you, Matt. Have a good one.
Have fun.
Better. All right, let's try not to Minecraft ourselves in this.
Yeah.
Responses to the 6th and 7th questions are, of course, the most interesting to me, and I cannot even begin to do them justice today, but we can talk during the Q&A and in the Q&A.
What are they going to ask? So what was your data like? What kind of questions did you ask?
Maybe I ask, so you mentioned the 6th and 7th questions. What was the question, actually?
Exactly. Like, all the sourcing should have been like...
Maybe that explains why there's theoretically 50 minutes of questions.
Questions that don't get the right answers. I mean, it's just like the whole thing is literally her giving us what the data she got, like all the percentages of all the different check boxes, and that's her presentation. I'm like, I don't care about any of that information. I care about what you asked them and what they said. What was the question and what were their answers? You say, well, here's the question. 34% said this. 16% said this, 12% said this. That's what I want to know. Because then I can be like, okay, this many people out of this size of a people group or survey group got it wrong. Some of them got it right. Whatever it might be. That's what I wanted to freaking know. But I obviously can't know that because she's not covering any of that.
Chat.
So I can clearly tell she's a person in a university position of power and doesn't even know how to do her job. And these are the people that milk you for all of that college funds you get. So this is why college is lame and you should go to a tech school.
I provided a number of responses that I selected to show the variety of responses to the questions. Table 9 covers my analysis of responses to what makes Tolkien's work important to you.
A question. Will she give us an answer or will she give us percentages? That's the question.
I've identified 3 broad categories of things. The first one is genre, which includes responses that focus.
She just skipped it completely and went on to the next one.
Well, no, it could be that this is still the same one and that the answers are categorized in those categories.
But that's saying here's a question and here's the subdata categories and the subdata categories and then here's the percentage categories of the subcategories.
Mhm.
It's not an actual question.
Well, it might be the answer all the way at the end. Who knows? I don't have much hope.
You have a lot more faith in this than I do.
Focus on structural or literary elements of Tolkien's work, plots, character, themes, and or his
Yes, all of his works have all those things. Congratulations.
importance to the genre of fantasy.
Extreme importance to the genre of fantasy. This is well known and well documented.
Mm-hmm.
Better source than this and better presentations. I'm gonna.
Half of the respondents focused on genre as making his work important to them. The 2 other categories are based on some sort of personal connection. These are responses that are written more in
Yeah, she just skipped the question. We don't have the answers.
first person language rather than listing the structural elements and explaining how reading Tolkien made their lives better.
This sounds more like an essay on how to write an essay based off of percentages of an essay.
Yeah. No, but this is still talking about that very same question.
What are we talking about in this particular question? Would you fill me in? Like me?
The question was what makes Tolkien important to you, or reading, or whatever. And she went over, I have the answers, and I subdivided them in those categories. Some of them think, oh, the genre makes is the important bit of whatever the question was. Some focus on characters, some focus on the plot as their reason, and now she's going through all of that, it seems.
We'll see if that actually pans out.
Better in some way. A quarter of the respondents are grouped under this basic personal connection, and those range from explaining how Tolkien helped them deal with their lives while adolescent to influencing their choices of profession as adults.
This is why I like Tom Clancy's fiction stuff, but I can't stand his nonfiction because it's literally this boring.
Could be. But like, for example, here, the answer given was, oh, Tolkien's work is important to me because it helped me grow personally through adulthood or whatever for a few people. Yes, so it is still answering the question. It's still about that same thing.
She just makes it as boring as possible.
Presented in the worst way imaginable. Yes.
Like, imagine this. Okay. Tom Clancy, Rainbow Six. You got this story of all these different people from all over the globe, counterterrorism unit, going to different places. You get to see the in-depth details of their lives, how they interact with each other, how they bond, coming from different places, different cultures, and all that type of stuff. But being cool people, being military people, coming together and having expertise in different things, sniper, explosives, leadership roles, or, close combat, range combat, different types of things, having multiple squads going at certain commands. I know I'm probably boring everybody, but I love that stuff. It's a good, cohesive story. Then he's like, let's write a book that's nonfiction about airplanes, specifically like Air Force jets and stuff. And then he goes into like about here's the information about the fuselage. Here's all these little buttons over here in the cockpit, and here's what each one of them does. It's like it's the most mind-numbingly boring stuff on the planet because there's nothing going on. There's no plot. There's no nothing. There's no character. It's just here's how this works. I'm like, this is more of a manual for people joining the Air Force. That's what this is. It's boring if you're not going to be doing that, which is why you read one and not the other. But she's trying to present the nonfiction air fuselage percentage findings of a survey from Texas A&M comparative to what the actual story that everyone wants to know, or the actual questions we want to know of the counterterrorism unit. We want to know all the different stuff of all the characters. Who I relate to Chavez more than I relate to somebody else in the group because interesting character or has a cool loyalty system or whatever it might be. I can't make heads or tails of what she's saying. Like, you have to translate to me what she's saying because all she's doing is shouting data points, but no answers to a question specifically. If she said, in this thing, what does Tolkien mean to you? 34% of these people said he means a lot because he was a big step for my growth in the fantasy section. 16% said I just liked his work because it was simple for me to understand, which is obviously not going to be any errors lying in that case. It's not simple based. It's obviously old English style. And then you have like 5.
I can cut through sort of that stuff because, I live sort of in academia, so I'm used to this.
You're used to them prattling off useless information because it's at the wrong point in the wrong question. It's like having all the right answers, but not giving them correctly in the correct form. It's like, yeah, I could have a bunch of gibberish on my screen and call it code.
Well, I wouldn't say the correct form. It's just the most efficient form.
Well, she's showing the code behind the website, not showing you the website.
The website itself, yeah.
I need the website because that's how you present. Now, if she's doing a presentation to people that only care about the behind the scenes.
Correct, I think, is the wrong way to phrase it. It's more efficient or not in this case.
It's definitely inefficient. Highly inefficient.
A third group, about 10%, are gathered under change over time because they describe personal connections that are lifelong and often changing because how Tolkien's work changes for them every time they read it. Another 10% identify both genre and some sort of personal connection. Table 10 covers the complex range of responses to the question about how respondents think or feel about the widespread, in my experience at least, assumption that Tolkien's religion must be part of any interpretation. In my analysis of the 112 surveys,
I'd say yes and no. I can work with that question right there. Like, it's kind of assumed that obviously his Catholicism played a big role of inspiration for obviously Eru, the beginning of Arda, all that, like the creation mythos. That makes sense, but it doesn't mean it's a one-to-one allegorical situation of his religion and how it impacts it, because you do not need to understand Catholicism or agree with Catholicism to understand that it sounds like Catholicism. Like, it's a similar construct of how Catholicism came to be. And it's like, well, yes, if you're going to build a mythos of how the creation of everything came to be, you're probably going to pick the most logical one, which is probably going to be the one you believe, because it's the easiest one to put together. That's the end of that. You don't need any more to work with. You could be pantheist, atheist, agnostic, you could be animist, you could be whatever you want. None of that is relevant to the fact that, yeah, I can identify that Catholicism played a role, just like Protestantism. I can't speak today.
Yeah, Protestantism.
Thank you. Is a big role in C.S. Lewis's Chronicles of Narnia. Whoopity-doo. But he was blatantly allegorical on purpose, where obviously Tolkien was not, because he didn't want it to be allegorical. He just wanted a mythos for the country, despite obviously the country itself not being originally a Christian country. It was eventually a Christian country, but it was not originally Christian. So he's just taking the idea and saying
Actually, it's not entirely true.
the Anglo-Saxons, I doubt, were Christian when
They were for most of the part.
I'm
The
not-
bit that
I'm not saying they
Tolkien is sad
Christian.
about is the losing of the mythology by the Norman
leading
conquest.
up to. Yes. My point is that I'm not saying that they didn't become early on. I'm saying they weren't originally. They would have been more closer to pagans than they would have been anything else. They weren't initially. It's not like they show up in England and everyone's already got a church with monks and everything. No, they had to like kind of.
No, of course not. That would be silly.
That's what I'm saying. It's like it wasn't initially a Christian mythos because it wasn't initially a Christian nation, but it grew rapidly into a Christian nation, as we know from like the eventuality of
But see,
Northumberland, Essex, and all that stuff.
It's a bit complicated, of course, because
It is complicated.
Britain was Christian under the Roman Empire.
Christian. Well, yes, but the Romans controlled like half of it.
No, like the Romans controlled all of what is now called England and Wales as well. Wales. Was
Yeah,
also-
that's not Britain though. That's England and Wales.
Yeah, but Britain is just the Scottish bit added to it, and some random bits.
With
of
Ireland. Random bits. Ireland's just random, apparently.
No, they don't control all of it.
Well,
So
what I'm
it's
saying
a
is
random
that-
bit of Ireland.
When I say half of it, I'm saying obviously that's what we would know as England and Wales because that's
Yeah, but the Anglo-Saxons didn't live in Scotland.
yes, but the Romans showed up.
Yeah, but when the Romans showed
Hey,
up, there weren't
when the
Anglo-Saxons there.
There were predecessors and the indigenous peoples of Britain and whatever.
Sure.
That they weren't Christian.
No.
Yes.
They were Celtic.
Yes, which is not Christian. Thank you for proving my point.
Yeah. But that happened basically more than 2,000 years ago.
Yes. And
Like
Not
all
yet.
Christians.
it
Yeah.
became Christian, yes.
Yeah,
because
yeah.
nothing is inherently Christian.
No, I get that.
Because
Nothing is
Christianity
inherently
came out-
Christian, but they were Christian really early on in the history of Christianity,
Yes.
comparatively, of course.
Yes. Because it spread like wildfire. But that's besides the point.
But
So I'm saying is that he's using
it's
it.
not the Celtic mythos that he's referring to when he says this was
I know.
lost.
Yes, because England is not Celtic. per
Exactly.
se. I know. He's applying it to England specifically.
Yeah, but they had Anglo-Saxon myths, which were
Yes.
Christian.
They also had paganistic stuff from Anglo-Saxons
Sure,
as well.
there was also some pagan stuff mixed in, but it was for
Yes.
the most part
Well,
Christian.
I understand that. All I'm saying is that the lead into for understanding why he wrote the Lord of the Rings legendarium or the Tolkien legendarium the way he did is based off of its inspiration of all those different places, but also his Catholic religion. Excuse me. So that's why he was inspired, but it doesn't mean that you have to be Catholic to understand it. Because even if you weren't Catholic and he doesn't say anything about Catholicism at all, he just said, I'm going to vomit some god named Eru Iluvatar out. He's going to vomit some Ainur out who are going to have some named Valar who are going to vomit out a planet, who are going to vomit out all the things on that planet and going to vomit out everything the way that is. You don't have to be a Catholic to understand that that's a creation myth, so to speak, and that if you have two brain cells you can rub together, that he is Catholic, and that sounds an awful lot like the Catholic mythos. That's what I'm saying. But it's not required for you to understand Catholicism to know that it's just a creation myth, like the Greeks, like the Romans, like everybody else in the freaking world. So it's a pretty standard come to understanding at that point.
For my previous presentations, I have
Thank God we missed your previous presentations. There's a whole playlist of the Tolkien seminars, I believe, of the same year about translations and their errors. Like Eowyn in Chinese translations. It's freaking weird. I'm like, nobody cares. Literally nobody cares. So whatever.
already identified 8 different types of responses. working with the 38 for this presentation, I think I've discovered a ninth one. So the types of responses are, first, people who reject the assumption entirely with varying degrees of intensity.
Assumption of what? I don't know what we're assuming, but okay.
18% of them fall into this category. Second, people who accept that the assumption can be useful or valid when reading Tolkien, but disagree that it is required or necessary, and who also tend to reject it for themselves, another 18%. Third,
Whatever it is, sounds like 36% is really, really accurate.
people who accept the assumption as useful for academics working on Tolkien, but not important for general readers. This is a separate category because the responses focus on hypothetical groups of readers who presumably read for different purposes. Analysis is split off from pleasure.
Either one, as long as you have the understanding of what the story is saying, it doesn't matter, even if you're using it explicitly for scholarly works. That's perfectly logical. It's just, I don't understand.
The respondents don't personally reject the idea of the importance of the assumption. Only one person in my group thinks this, although the larger number of surveys have more people thinking this way. Fourth, people who agree to some extent with or see some merit in the assumption, often specifying the usefulness for the Silmarillion. Another 1% or 2% is in that category. Fifth,
We also don't know what the assumption is still. I don't remember if he actually said it or not, or if it just blew past.
Yeah, I might have missed him.
I might have missed it.
It might also just not be there.
It could also just not be important.
people who said that they accept Tolkien's religious beliefs as important to understanding his work, but do not
There's an assumption.
think they are any more or less important than any other biographical information. This category is, again, a separate one because the position is that any and all information about the author can be equally useful. It's a biographical approach.
I mean, it could be useful information, understanding, like, obviously how he had to deal with
why he wrote it the way he did.
Well, like,
maybe.
World War I information, and how he despised the industrial type thing where they just mindless machines and less focus on nature. That's why he's like, I'm more of a hobbit, because he enjoys nature, he enjoys the simple pleasures of life, that kind of stuff. That's all useful information, but it's not necessary to read the story.
Not that his religious beliefs must be privileged or isolated in ways that other personal information is not. 16% of this group of respondents fell into this category. 6, people who respond with some variant of "the author is dead," often quoting that phrase in their response.
The death of the author.
They accept that Tolkien's religion affected his story, but emphasize equally the importance of the reader's personal worldview, whether their own or readers in general, in interpreting the story, which is what makes this its own category.
How does one do that?
Do what specifically?
Take into consideration Tolkien's Catholicism, which is irrelevant to the story, then taking their own personal viewpoints, ideologies, or belief systems, and applying it to the story.
Well,
I
by
don't see
ignoring Tolkien.
I know, but like, how do you apply Islam to this? How do you apply Buddhism to this? How do you apply?
Well, I mean,
like, none of that
sure, there might be some parallels you could draw, and maybe awkwardly so, but that doesn't stop them from trying.
It just, I can't comprehend, and maybe this is just because it logically doesn't make sense.
To be fair, though, I'm not too familiar with the intricate details of both Islam and Buddhism, so.
Well, I'm just saying, like, pick a
Maybe,
worldview. Whether
maybe there is
they could be
something
animists, they could be
different.
agnostic, they could be atheists, whatever. It's like it's completely pointless. Like if you're an atheist and you read the Legendarium, you obviously can tell that Eru Iluvatar
Yeah.
is the character.
But
Even
let's
if
say
you're
you
not-
skip that initial part. The rest of it all can very reasonably be interpreted
the Valar would be obvious
as
deity
polytheistic.
type of thing, sure, but they'd be like an angel, deity, or
Oh yeah,
other
sure.
spiritual being.
Because
But if you're an atheist, how do you read into that? You can't. It's just like it's
powerful beings. I don't know.
powerful beings that clearly are not either human or other things. We have no categorization for them other than Ainur, and Ainur is a what?
And of course, there's the part where they literally create the universe, which yeah.
Well, they subcreate, but yes.
Yeah, but together, right?
Again, it's one of those things where like
the rest.
If you go backwards and you have to like, okay, well, how does this explain this? How does it explain this? You're always going to end up with a Iluvatar.
It's turtles all the way down.
Huh?
I said it's turtles all the way down. Yes.
It's turtles? What? Turtles. 2 minute turtle enough for your turtle clip? Turtle. Sorry.
21% of the respondents are in this group. 7, a number of respondents said they never saw religion in Tolkien's work, or they only learned about his religion late in their own lives, or they had never heard this assumption from Tolkien readers. 7% of the respondents are in this group. The 8th one is my current category. I'm currently calling it depends on definition, and it's complicated.
Depends on definition should have been the main one because it does depend on the definition. If you're using the incorrect definition, you're going to arrive at the incorrect answer. That's literally how academia works. If you're using, I hear your keyboard again, by the way. If you're using a particular, oh no,
No, I said I know.
Oh, you know.
I just didn't care.
You want to hear the trumpets of your keys. But it's like I read this story. Like Billy goes to the supermarket to get milk, and this is like, well, if I use these definitions, he clearly went there to rob them. He clearly went there to murder the clerk. He clearly went there to crack the asphalt where they park cars. Like all the definitions. All of a sudden, you could sprout up any possible explanation for anything. So you got to read the proper definitions, and you get the proper definitions by understanding the time period in which it was wrote, and I should say in which it was written properly. And then you say, okay, here's all the terms that were used. Not like, oh, well, now we use these different terms, and therefore this is what it means. So that should be the start off point, not the oops, I forgot it point.
These responses tend to be longer than all the rest, more dialogic, and often cite a great deal of specific evidence from Tolkien's work. A number of these people contrast his work to Lewis's more allegorical fantasy.
We have acknowledged that Lewis's is allegorical and Tolkien's is not. Congratulations, we've made it, folks. Now watch us just backpedal all of that.
Or they go into great detail.
What?
I'm not sure if I'm ready for that.
Well, because she said that we're obviously one is allegorical and acknowledging through that the other one is not allegorical. And now we're going to apply everything that is allegorical to the non-allegorical because animism, I guess? Atheists, queers, weirdos, whatever.
Describing interactions with Tolkien readers. 10% of the responses fit here. While working through this specific group of responses, I realized that there was perhaps a subset of this 8th category that might become a 9th. These are people who describe that they had very negative responses. They judge those readers who insist on what I'm calling the Christian allegorical reading. By that, I mean readers insisting that the Christian message is the only correct one, the only one true to Tolkien's intent, thus allegorical, as opposed
which is false
to what I believe are the majority of readers who see Christian themes in the work, but who do not attempt to gatekeep or exclude others.
It has nothing to do with gatekeeping. It's you can see a theme and be like, oh, I could relate this to this. I could relate Aragorn coming as like a Jesus Christ figure or a Christology figure or something like that, a Christos figure. That doesn't mean that's what Tolkien was going for. That just means I can compare the two. That's it. It's not allegorical. I could, but it's not. Is that simplistic enough for anybody?
6% of the respondents took this stance. The 8th question I had was an optional one, simply asking if they had anything else they wanted to say about Tolkien's work. I've not done much work with this response.
This survey only has 8 questions.
I guess.
Damn.
The most important part was, are you gay, bisexual?
True. Yeah, no, that's
the important bit.
Like the first 7 or so questions.
Oh, bother.
Time I spent with the others, but I have included them on the handout. My conclusion,
Which I still don't have, and it's really annoying,
is that the stories people tell about reading Tolkien's work are powerful ones. I believe my project...
That's a buzzword statement if I ever heard it. The weird stories they told me were powerful. Why were they powerful? Because they told me their personal experience. Why is that powerful? Because it's personal experience. What does that have to do with the actual story? And why is it powerful? Like it's just broken record.
Featuring the voices and stories of Tolkien readers whose beliefs and experiences have previously been invisible or suppressed in scholarship or some fandoms.
It's not suppressed. It's not relevant. That's the difference. That's not suppression. That's lack of relevance. If you don't have relevance, then why would anybody care? Like, we're not going to write a book and publish it based off of your preference or opinion on something when it's clearly not relevant to the story. No one's going to buy it.
Well, no one's going to buy it, but that doesn't stop them from publishing.
I mean, it does, because a publisher wants to sell copies.
Well, okay, sure, but if they self-publish,
no, well, yes, but that's not getting it published. You could publish. Nothing's stopping. No one's silencing you from you self-publishing. So that's obviously not the.
I mean, this whole thing is essentially self-publishing.
Yes, what I'm saying is she's saying that they're silenced or whatever, and it's like, well, you
then
can't.
Why does this video exist?
So none of it has to do. Look, my point is that she's in relation to an academic work. It's not being self-published because it wouldn't fit the category if it was self-published. So she's talking about from a published, like a publisher perspective, they're being censored or suppressed or something. And it's like, well, that's because publishers are there to make money, to cover the costs for what they're producing, as well as make profit. If your thing will not sell, they will not publish it because it's no benefit for them to publish it. You can publish your own documents through, say, your university or something, but that's not going to be published through a publisher in which it's going to be general basic news. But there are plenty of Tolkien-type style series of books and whatever that don't have anything to do with accuracy to the story or whatever, that are just literally someone's opinion. They still sell, I guess, to people who care about that opinion type, but they're not going to sell by any means the same number as actual Tolkien's work himself. Just not gonna.
Basis has the potential to show how much is shared across the spectrum of religious and non-religious beliefs. In terms of future work, I realized as I was completing this presentation that I will really need to write a book rather than an essay or two to start to convey that all of I...
Imagine an entire book of this. Oh, the pain and the agony.
Start to convey all of I have learned. So that will be one of my future projects. Thank you.
So it's actually almost 15 minutes.
It's 17 minutes. She had like 2 minutes. She had like a 2-minute introduction talking about what she was going to talk about, and then spent the rest of the 15 extra minutes talking about what she was going to talk about.
Yeah. So indeed, we have almost 15 minutes. Well, not really. It's 12 more like, but
12 minutes. Yeah, 12 minutes of
questions.
Let's see what that is.
Let's see what they have to bring.
Oh, thank you very much.
It comes in. That was sensational. What about it was sensational?
Robin.
I would have been like, that's definitely a data point.
And
I
I'm
can't hear you,
sure
you're
as
muted.
well, all of the everyone.
You're still muted.
Yeah, fair. I said that's a presentation, surely, maybe.
That's definitely a presentation. Absolutely smashing.
That you have interviewed and got data for, I'm sure they would like to thank you as well for being their voice for them today as well. I think so. Someone posted in the chat, you've exploded their brain with the amount of data that you have provided as well. But at the same time, it's when
Your brain was certainly exploded.
So I'm pretty sure this one was live. I don't think this one.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
Seminar as well.
I guess we'll see if she's wearing the same haircut, outfit, and everything in the same spot.
Same lighting. Yep.
Is it hearing
or lack thereof.
Those voices perhaps that we've not heard so much before as well. So it's impressive to see the impact that this can have when we do listen. So thank you very much. Now,
my students used to call me the queen of the handouts, but I didn't want to just.
It's a shame that you weren't the empire of handouts, because then we could have a pair too.
No, it would be Empress.
Sure. We know those don't actually exist, but yes.
Well, I mean, they do, but they just don't have much power.
Or empire.
Give numbers. I wanted to share the voices. So
I wish I heard the voices instead of the data of the voices, but okay.
Yeah, exactly. That's the powerful element.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I meant.
There's nothing. That's a great face right there, by the way. There's nothing powerful about anything she said, because nothing was said.
Well, stuff was said. It just didn't have much content.
Data points were spewed, but nothing about the data points was said.
Apologies if anyone can hear seagulls. Apparently there's, I don't know, there might be like a fight club happening outside with seagulls.
Hey, the first rule about Fight Club is you don't talk about Fight Club. Gosh.
Seagulls. I don't know what's going on.
Well, he's getting kicked out.
Yeah, he's already been kicked out. You
Fair
can tell.
enough. Maybe that's why he talks about it.
You can see the stench coming off of him because he hasn't used the soap. Pun intended. Whatever.
Okay, so Robin, let's dive straight in to the questions. So remember, if you've got any questions for Robin, please do post them in the chat.
I have a lot of questions.
Well, post them in the chat.
What are we talking about? I don't think you want to be the only one who sees them.
Not in the chat.
Fair enough.
Q&A. Okay, Robin. Okay, so this question, they missed the very beginning. So
Please tell me what you were talking about. Oh, you were talking about the rest of it. Okay, cool.
if you have covered this, then please feel free that we can move on. But the questioner was curious what led you to focus specifically on queer respondents as opposed.
That is a good point.
That's because queer is an identity without an essence and can thus be used simply to align yourself with a particular group of people for
And it's
political
powerful.
influence.
It's very powerful, stunning and brave. But
Yes.
we had that entire thing of all these categories, but nothing about the categories. Why are we here? What are we doing?
Well, I suppose we need to read the actual book, right? That is to be
The one that she hasn't written? Yeah, that one.
yeah.
to this
Because we just got a summary of the
queer identity.
methodology, not
We
the
got a
actual
summary of the methodology of the data points summary.
Yeah.
This is literally the most boring thing in the planet.
Mhm.
Like, if she's like, here's a question I asked, and here's the percentage of all these things, even if she was throwing in gay, straight, lesbian, pansexual, whatever, even if she was doing that, but at least she would tell us the question, say the percentages of these categories, and what they thought. that would be more interesting than what she just did, because that's not what she just did. That's what she thinks she just did. That's not what she just did.
Specifically affects their relationships with Tolkien.
Okay, well, the full survey project is the 112 is everybody who wants to talk about it. But working through 112 surveys, especially with the open-ended responses, where many people typed hundreds and at one person's thousands of words, is impossible. So what I've been doing to analyze the data is break it up into smaller chunks.
Imagine writing 1,000 words for her to not mention any of them. It's just like, it's just a poll, guys. She just wants to know if you're gay, lesbian, straight, whatever. She doesn't care about your 1,000 word essay.
And before I've looked at like either all the atheist respondents or the agnostic responses. For this one, it's sort of complicated. Actually, I proposed a version of this for the 2019 Tolkien conference, which was rejected. And so when the diversity theme came up this year, in part because I have been working on the queer anthology that Chris Vaccaro and Steve and I are editing, I thought, why don't I pull out all the queer responses and look at what they're
Not agenda driven at all.
Yeah, why don't I look at that? Well, maybe because there's no reason to do so without a proper hypothesis.
And even then, it wouldn't matter. It's like, as a gay person, what did you think? And be like, I was offended there weren't gay people. Like, then don't read the book. Literally that simple. But I want gay people in the story. Well, too bad. The story's already written. You can't just change it.
Or can you?
Well, that's the thing. It's like, I want to. And it's like, but why? How will that benefit the story and all? Well, I'll be able to see myself in it. I'm like, so you want to see yourself, which is a modern construct of what actually stories are like. Because stories are there to tell you what happened, not to actively insert you in them as, like, you're not a participant in a story. Like, that's what I was trying to get across to you and Matt earlier, is that it's not about your interpretation outside of you understanding how the story is going based upon it. So like when in Wheel of Time, when Matt Cawthon goes and does something, it's not your opinion that matters. It's what actually Matt Cawthon did, because that's what it's telling you.
Sure.
Here's where these characters went and did something.
But you can interpret it in a way. Right. You necessarily have to.
Give me an example. I mean, I might agree with you, but I'll give you an example.
Well, see, the story tells the exact, let's call it the order of events that happen, right? Mm-hmm. But when you read it, I and probably a lot of other people don't just read the events. We attribute a certain meaning to those events, right?
Well, I mean, you could add like an interpretation of like why the person did what they did.
Sure.
And that's pretty normal. Be like, oh, I think he did this because of this reason. Because he like,
but that is necessarily a individual thing, right? I don't have the same results in my mind of why did this happen as, for example, you would have.
I agree and disagree simultaneously, and the reason why is because when Matt goes and like,
any sense.
It does. If you let me explain. So when Matt goes to save like Egwene and Nynaeve and Elaine down on a tier from Gabriel's guys, Lord Gabriel, who we all know as Robin. Spoiler alert. But when he goes down there, he's doing it because he has motivations. He tells us what the motivations are, but we also
we know the motivation.
We infer more than that blatant. He tells us his exposition of why. I like those girls.
The inference is necessarily based on our own perception.
So if you, as a person of perception, go and say, well, he did it because of the tobacco, it was affecting his mind,
then that would be wrong, sure. But that does not mean.
But if I say
one possible explanation.
I'm not saying there is only one possible explanation. I'm saying, But if I say, because Matt's character is, he wants to be lazy, he wants to do as little work as possible, he doesn't want to be in danger, he doesn't want any of this stuff, but he's the kind of person who wants to help his friends, even if it inconveniences him because he cares about them. That's an inference. It's not blatantly technically stated.
No,
I mean,
I see it's an inference, but say you
but
have
it's
your
based, the inference is
specific,
based on actual information.
No, I get that.
That's what I'm saying.
End up with
That's
maybe your exact definition as you just gave, but if I read that same, well, the whole series, of course, because it's not just one moment.
You were reading a wrong series. You were reading the abridged version.
I might get, because of my different experience with things than you, obviously, because I'm European, you're American, we have different environments.
And you're strong, yes.
Well, that aside, I might come to a very similar conclusion, but it will almost, it will be not exactly the same.
And I'm not saying
And
that
where things become more vague in the story, right? So Matt is a very well-defined character, right? But let's say some other random person.
Most of the characters are well defined because he's a very
Most of them are, sure, yes. Because of course Robert Jordan is a very detailed writer, but if we take a minor character that maybe doesn't have as much screen time, the interpretation,
like Doman. Doman.
Yeah, but I mean he's still sort of on the forefront.
Well, he's detailed, but not that detailed. He's not fleshed out to the ends of the earth like the other characters.
No, but we still have a good idea of how he works.
Yes,
but
what I'm saying is, it's like
I'm talking super minor characters, for example.
Okay, how about the lesbian couple that gets tied underneath the bed? Like, we know
we don't
about
really know too much about them.
We don't,
so
but we can infer.
We know a bit,
and why.
The less information you have on the exact details, the more you have to sort of guess based on what's happening with the rest of the stuff.
Again, I get that, but I'm saying is that there's
because of different experiences, we end up with different interpretations of the situation.
You could say you think that they were seeing each other because powdery glitter dust from a unicorn's butthole. Sure.
Yeah, you could say that. It's a bit weird, but fair enough.
Any interpretation outside of the actual interpretation is a bit weird, just saying. But I come out that
we don't know the actual interpretation.
I mean, we do, because it's implied. They had a relationship of the homo type, and that
but
they were meeting
we don't know all the rest surrounding it. We don't know the nature of that relationship beyond simply that fact.
It's inferred in certain places. But again, if you want to believe something minor or whatever, that's not a big deal. And even if you want to believe something major, that's not a big deal. But when you bring it back into the lore,
no, I get that. But see, everything that's not explicitly stated can be open to discussion.
Yeah, I'm fine with the discussion. I'm not fine with somebody saying this is the lore.
Oh no, sure.
That's I'm not fine. I'm fine with
the definitive statement of this is what it is.
Yeah, but let's say
that is definitely a no.
Let's say your interpretation of those two women is that, the powdered glitter that came out of a unicorn's butthole. If that's your interpretation, I'm going to come down on you and be like, you have no bearing for that whatsoever.
Exactly.
How did you
go for a more reasonable
and you give me a reason and be like, okay, I still don't know how you came to that conclusion because
we make different conclusions, right? But it's not always necessarily only one, and that's I don't even know why we were having this discussion anymore. But
there's a natural because she's talking about how a person who's bi would relate to Tolkien stuff, and it's like,
oh yeah, sure.
How would that have relevance to anything?
I mean, I don't think that is particularly a big influence. Well, maybe if you're a leftist, but
well, I'm saying like when you read into things, like all of these freaking seminars read into things like super hard, like it's the projection is astronomical. This is literally universal.
Astronomical even guts it enough.
That's why I said universal, as in the entire universe. It's universally projecting.
Might even go multiversal.
Huh?
Might even go multiversal.
Well,
wow.
If you have any scientific evidence that multiverse exists, but sure. But like,
it's all about the scientific evidence. It's because
0.
they're
You
yeah.
can't use but my point is that like the way you come up to a conclusion, there's a reasonable conclusion and then there's a non-reasonable conclusion. If it's reasonable, like if you're basing it off of reasonable things, I'd be like, oh, that's a potential one, sure. But if it's not, if you're like, well, that's because he came to this conclusion because I don't believe in God, literally is not a reasonable conclusion.
Yeah.
This reason because I'm queer, literally not a reasonable conclusion. It has no effect on the story.
Sure.
So my point is that these types of things, how are they a relevant viewpoint from the I'm gay or I'm bi or I'm agnostic, I'm atheist, I'm pansexual, I'm animist, animist. Like none of those from that specific viewpoint is relevant or reasonable because that's not like even if your entire worldview is based around animism, you're not going to come to the conclusion that Treebeard's actually a god.
I mean, well, to be fair, you might to that conclusion.
No. You might wish they were, but nothing in the story pursues it as they are.
Okay, but see, that also assumes
from a reasonable perspective
definition of God, right? Animists have a very different one than say Christians. So,
well, I'm saying God is in like little g, like even
I mean,
G, which is literally any deity of any shape or form, like
if you,
Greek God, Egyptian God, Roman God, Chinese God, Japanese God.
It's not necessarily impossible, though.
I'm saying you wouldn't have a reasonable.
No, sure, but it's more
you
like
have a personal preference. Like I imagine or I picture him as a deity, which doesn't mean
the possibility, but it's based on a few of maybe not.
It's based on an irrelevant concept. Let's put it that way. That makes the simplest way to say it. But
it's simply because we don't have an origin story for Treebeards. It could be that he's.
Well,
for
we
example,
know that he's been there. He's been there since Arda. I think is the one thing. Like Arda was created and he was there because of, I'm assuming, Yavanna or whatever. Like
Yavanna at some point begged Manwë to, hey, can I have some people of my because of course Aule had the dwarves and such.
Yeah. Can you imagine what every single one of the Valar were like? Well, I want this group. Well, I want this group.
Yeah.
The whole world filled with all creatures.
It could be implied that maybe some of the Maya took the form of Ents, right? And then maybe that counts as a god. I don't know.
As far as we know, I don't know. But my point is more of the relevance to the story. None of those would have relevance to the story because the story is not bringing up those things. It's not bringing up sexuality. It's not bringing up.
But see, if you're, for example, gay, and that has defined your entire personality, the way you interact with other people is different, I assume, right, than non-gay people.
Tell us about your personal experience, Sage.
And as such, right, the way you interact with people is generally a big part of how you interpret personal relationships, of course. So in this case, maybe that
I'm not saying that you can't have.
It's not directly the identity categories as defined in this video.
Well, I want to clarify
sort of effects that maybe are downstream of those.
I want to clarify because, like, back to Wheel of Time explanation. Pips from White Cloaks and I have very different theories on the whole trap in the Great Hunt of the Horn that Rand goes into with the flies in it.
Oh yeah, that one.
It is a weird one, but we can both probably come to the same conclusion that it was something Jordan was going to take in a direction and he just didn't take it in that direction. But it was already written, so it is whatever. And I'm like, that's fair enough, but we can still hypothesize.
Like early parts of the story where the magic system wasn't worked out fully yet.
Yeah, which is understandable because it's a big story. You could go a lot of directions with it. It'd been nice if he kind of closed it off instead of leaving it just open-ended. But it's like, was it put on Fane? Because Robert Jordan claims it in one interview. Was it Lanfear, which he claims in another interview? And it's just like, that's one of the reasons I don't like authors just throwing things in randomly because even he didn't know. And he's just kind of annoyed that people would ask him that question. It's like, well, people want to know the answer because we're going to pay attention to this because we're hardcore nerds / fans. But it's like, we have differentiations, but we both could conceivably have legitimate, reasonable concepts of why we came to that conclusion. Now, obviously, I think mine's more reasonable than his, and he thinks his is more reasonable than mine. That's why we have different viewpoints. It's fine. And that's part of the fun of theorizing within the fandom of it in itself from a nerd perspective. But what wouldn't make sense is like, well, did Lanfear do it? Well, Lanfear did it clearly because she's bisexual. It's like, no, that has nothing to do with this at all, in the slightest. It wouldn't have any like reason as to why, because it has nothing to do with revenge focus or the tsundere kind of anime girl, or no, it'd be more yandere type of crazy psychopathic killer girlfriend kind of thing. Like, it has nothing related to the incident that would give her a valid reason as to why to do it. Where other reasons, like because she's, you know, possessive of him, or because she wants to know it actually is him, or this, that, they like, there's other reasons as to why, but then there's other things that kind of make it collapse because, again, it wasn't a fully filled out system. So in that system, we can only guesstimate. That's literally it. So, but we could come to a hypothetical situation in which we can reason why we think what we think, but everything always relates to it, even if we come from two different results, or 3, 4, 5, depending on how many people come in with their own viewpoints and hypothesis. It's still people focusing on what is actually available rather than throwing in things that are not available, like sexuality, religious belief, blah, blah, blah. The things that this lady's focusing on. She's focusing on a bunch of stuff that can't affect it because there's nothing to affect by it. If that makes sense. Hopefully that made sense to people. If you have questions, leave a comment and I'll try to answer to my best ability. Maybe Sage will even pop in to give his understanding of it too, because he's got a very academic like viewpoint of it. So, but I don't see these viewpoints as coming to a reasonable under the requirements she's giving us, which are the checkboxes. The checkboxes themselves cannot come to a reasonable explanation. Yeah. Whereas if they weren't these checkboxes, but the same people, maybe the same people, but they come from just a different reader. Like,
I put too much hope on my academic experiences with regards to literature, though. I'm more of a statistics person. Right?
Well, I'm saying you'll come up with a more academic, as in like this or this isn't academic. This or this isn't.
Oh yeah, sure.
Kind of thing. I'm not saying you're going to give every academic a statistic for Tolkien's work, but I'm just saying like you'll be able to identify it. It's like this is a scholastic academic venture. This is a not so much like what we're watching now is not so much scholastic academic literature on the literature itself, because it's picking a specific checkbox from a biased perspective because they want to see this.
Yeah. No, you need to show the entire survey results.
If they covered everything and gave a detailed breakdown, of course,
you also need to properly show how you chose the people to survey, right?
Well, it wouldn't even be that, because she claims it was completely unbiased. Which,
no, yeah, sure.
I'd be willing to give her the benefit of the doubt. I'm just saying she took that and kept shrinking onto what she wanted to see, which is sexuality type thing, or the other minority type based things, because that's what she was interested in. But I'm like, I don't even care about that information. You didn't give me anything with that information as to how they came to those conclusions for the questions you asked, which again, we only know a little bit about the questions because they weren't fully fleshed out as question 1, question 2, question 3. She kind of blurred them all together to some extent. So what would have helped would be a presentation that says question 1 and then showing us percentages and what their answers were averaged out. That would have been actually information I could work with, but she didn't give us that. She gave us this convoluted thing, and is more of an essay rather than a presentation, which is why I don't know why she said presentation, because it's not a presentation, it's an essay. She's presenting an essay. She's not presenting a presentation.
Yeah, but see, presenting is necessarily a presentation.
Not by the actual definition of presentation in the context that they're using it. Because in the context of a presentation, it's the slideshow showing information that which you click through on a little thing. That's what a collegiate presentation.
Yeah, okay, sure.
But if you're saying
in that
I'm
sense,
presenting,
yes.
therefore it's a presentation, and I'm like,
But
well,
like,
yes.
it has a broader definition.
It is a band that goes like if you go to a local bar and see a band playing jazz, are they doing a presentation because they're presenting their music? No, they're just playing music. Because the context is nothing of the sort. The context is not presenting in presentation format. It's presenting things because I'm presenting you with my information that I'm giving you. I'm not creating a presentation for it. Presenting is not presentation completely exclusively. That's not what they are. I'm presenting you with my understanding of her is not my presentation. It's just me presenting thoughts. That's literally it. Now, if I came with an entire, like if I watched this whole thing, came up with an entire slideshow and just put her to shame with how an actual presentation works, then I'd be presenting you a presentation.
Yeah, but I mean, the main core ingredient is that
Context.
you convey information. That's
well, in that
that's
case,
the
she's
core
definitely
part.
not doing a presentation because there's no context.
Yeah, no, okay, good point. Well, no, there is information in this. It's just useless information.
It's so broken in every direction. I couldn't possibly begin to gather together to make something up with it. That's the problem.
Yeah.
Let's see how she finishes these things.
They're saying, for one thing, the fact that 34% of the respondents identified as queer in some way, I thought
irrelevant,
larger than the general population. But at this point, I'm not sure that there is any difference between
or importance
how the queer versus the straight people would. I'll have to compare the data in terms of, if anything, perhaps it might be slightly higher negative responses with organized religion, but that's just my guess now. So
negative response of what? We don't even know what they're negatively responding to. Because
we don't know the questions. Yeah, maybe that was on the handouts.
Probably, but again, the handout should have been the presentation. Like there should be a presentation with slides and everything of what's on the handout, so you don't have to look down at your handout the entire time. You can actually look at the person and say, "Oh, that's interesting. Oh, look, there's the notes. I can look right back at you multiple times." Like that's what a presentation would be.
So what I've been doing with all the presentations is trying to work out a way to get into this. Working with this group suddenly made me realize how I could set the book up, which now I need to write. So that's all
That's going to be a convoluted mess.
I think one thing that we've been able to very clearly identify from this seminar is that it's a breeding ground for new ideas and for papers and now books as well. So I think yesterday that 3 speakers recommended our audience members to go out and research and write their own papers. So Rob,
preferably research and write papers that actually have substance to them and actually have sourcing and citation.
Yeah, but that's not a thing that really
because
happens.
if you notice, besides the lady who did the last one, the whatever, the Indian lady.
Yeah, but that's an exception. I think
yes,
I'm going to be slightly racist here, right? I think that's because she's Indian, and actually they might have a better work environment, maybe.
I mean, over American probably, but
yeah.
I guess
maybe
it depends.
More
depend on where they are and how they got there.
What is it?
There's a lot of people in academia that got there from a way that was not really academic. They got there through nepotism. They got there through a whole bunch of things. They're not there because they deserve to be there. They're there because somebody hired them to check a box, or they were cheap, or they were just what was available. Like that's not necessarily the shining sales pitch you want to have.
Autocracy is dead.
But even if she does the sourcing and citation, if what she said made no sense, it doesn't matter. There was no substance. There was only citation and sourcing, two things that didn't matter. Because what she was saying didn't make any logical sense. Like, well, there's no language in which I can understand it, so I have no way to understand it. And I'm like, you could just translate it. Like, I have a coworker. I asked him afterwards. I wanted to watch this. He hasn't watched it yet, but I was just like, he's Indian, and I was just like, well, this lady claims that there's no translation for this. He's like, I could translate it. I'm like, I literally just mentioned it offhand, and he's like, I could translate it. Well, that's the case. Then there's got to be
What are we translating?
Lord of the Rings, like all of Tolkien's work,
From what to what?
from English to Hindi.
Ah, okay.
Remember the whole? I mean, you probably don't remember. You probably locked it out. But
No, okay. So that was in reference specifically to the Hindi translation. Okay.
yes, because they had the what was it? The
They had Marathi and Bengali.
Bengali, yes, Bengali and Marathi. So like, oh, we don't have it in Hindi. It's like,
And translated.
hire,
Yeah, obviously.
hire somebody to translate it. That's not difficult. Like,
Well, I mean, you need to know the language.
You're telling me that there wasn't a single person who understood English and Hindi
Well,
and all of India. And all of
clearly
India.
not, right? Otherwise, they would have one.
It's not like they had British control or anything where they could learn through an education system at universities and schools. But anyway.
Yep.
We're now holding you to this. We're looking forward to your book.
Are we, though? Are we?
Well, I'm not going to read it.
I think Sage is super excited about it.
No, I just said I wouldn't read it.
That means you're super excited. You just can't hold your contain your insight.
Yeah. Maybe.
Okay. Okay. So
If you send me a copy, maybe I will.
Just get it from your library. What's wrong with you?
No, they don't have that shit at our library.
Why not? It's Europe. They have tons of crap there.
Yeah, but not this crap. This is below even our standards.
You don't have any standards. That's why you'd have it.
You commented that you wanted to specifically pick out the queer responses. So it'll be interesting
because she's what would that be? It wouldn't be racist. It wouldn't be sexist. What would it be? Genderist.
No, see, that's why queer
sexuality
is an identity without an essence. You can't use it to discriminate against the group based on.
But you can, because
you can, sure, but not based on essential characteristics of the person.
Are you implying that people of those ideologies and gender whatevers don't have essence or substance?
No, they do. It's just not in the queer part.
I don't know. I thought it was pretty strange myself. But
yes, but being strange is not really a, let's call it
a defining characteristic.
Yeah. Well, no, it is, but you can't pinpoint a specific part and say, "Oh, this is the strange." Well, you can.
I thought it was the gay gene. What are you talking about? They made the frogs gay.
Oh yeah, no, but that's gay. That's not queer.
Wait, gays aren't queer?
Gays are queer.
Oh, so that makes sense then.
Yeah. But the gay part is not the queer part.
You're saying that's not strange?
It is.
You're just walking back everything.
Yeah, it's not the same thing.
Well, it is in the original term.
In the original term, but they've changed it, so it's no longer the case.
You don't get to change words like that. That's not how words work.
Perhaps
it is now.
A broader response to the question.
At me. I'm the definition now.
How do the non-queer responses compared to the queer ones? So can you find a correlation with the frequency of certain answer categories with the reported sexual identity?
That is a very good question. Could also be asked in terms of, a large percentage of my respondents are women. First, let me.
That explains everything.
That's a clear bias in the population of the survey.
Because all the women are bisexual and
no, it's because it's not a representative survey because it's not roughly 50-50.
Well, this is people who responded to the survey, though, not people who were asked.
Yeah, but see, you need in order for a survey to be representative of the population, you need it to actually represent the population.
But what if the population is 60% women where they took the survey?
Yeah, but it's not.
How do you know?
Because that's statistics you can find online.
Well, no, because okay, it's like Vault. What is it? Vault 69 and Fallout, where they give you one man and 99 women.
Yeah, but then it's not
It's
representative
it's
of
a
the total
99
population.
99%.
It's just that specific subset.
Yes, but what I'm saying is it's the subset of people who responded, not the subset of people who actually exist.
Yeah.
What is she supposed to do? Take 10% of that and cut it out for no reason?
No, she needs to find a better
Find 10% men who answer it? Or what if they're not even 10% men and 10% women? What if it's 5% Rubik's Cube? I don't know whoever these people
What the
identify
fuck
as.
is that supposed to mean?
The same as all the other 1, 2, 3 plus thingies in the LGBT.
I suppose you do need to keep that into account nowadays.
I mean, you got the Rubik's cubes, the crayons, the wax candles, whoever it might be. Like,
Yeah, no.
whatever you are, you can't possibly have a good survey because there's more than the options that we used to have. So, whatever. But
that is quite a dilemma indeed. Yeah.
it's a way more interesting dilemma that this whole video.
We say I'm a humanities person who is not trained in any way in statistics. I know that
It shows.
Wow. Yeah. No, we can see that.
It shows.
correlation and correlation are different, but that's about it.
Wow.
And only 100.
I mean, that is a pretty cool concept. So that at least that's something.
This is top tier research, folks.
The question is, does she really understand that? Or just
I think
say
the answer is no.
Yeah.
12 completed surveys. I don't think this N is large enough to make any
Yeah,
real
no, of course not. So why do a fucking presentation about it
based on
if you don't have a high enough sample size?
She wants to write a book about it because her students praise her as the essay queen, because that's something to be proud of for some reason.
Well, okay, sure.
Okay, there is no rhyme or reason, none
That's
whatsoever. It's just because that's what she wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
She wanted to let the queer voices be heard, and that matters that they're queer because of reasons. I don't know.
collected very basic demographic information.
Which is inherently going to be a skewed research because nothing they said is related to this. If it was asking them, like, did you feel represented in this story? And obviously all of them would be no, because none of them exist except for the straights.
Mm-hmm.
Because in the story, there's nothing but straight. That's why it's queer.
Wait a minute.
So this is very much.
I mean, it does make sense. It's strange. It's not the norm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's why it makes sense.
Sort of an ethnographic and rhetorically based thing. I do the counting, and I will sort of have those comparative views. At this point, I've compared sort of agnostics versus atheists because they're such a big group. I've tried.
See, we're blending sexuality and religious or non-religious belief.
That's just intersectionality.
Well, true, but my point is that those don't have anything to do with each other.
It doesn't matter.
Answering a question. So if she throws them in, because remember, this is supposed to cross over between those two.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, how many percentage of the atheists are bi, lesbian, gay, anything other than straight? Then what does that matter? I can't think of a single topic in the entirety of the Legendarium that either of those things would factor into any reasonable question.
Yeah, no, I'm sure you could find a reasonable question, but I'm not.
It would not be reasonable. It had nothing to do with those topics. What topic would it be reasonable for?
Something related to the Valar or Maya, maybe.
But why? We know the Valar were straight, and some of them were married.
Oh, I thought we were talking about atheist agnostic.
Okay, the Valar are beings that are underneath a higher being, which is a deity, and they are considered deities of a lower. So what is that? How is an atheist?
Maybe get a different interpretation of the morality of whatever. I don't know.
But that's a morality question. That's not an atheist or agnostic question.
No, but they might have different views on.
Well, it's going to be like, well, the Valar don't exist because I don't believe in deities.
Probably not.
There you go. It's not a reasonable question to ask because what
Yeah,
what
but
they're
there are other questions that might be reasonable. I just can't think of any. So to immediately dismiss all possible questions as unreasonable seems
fair.
a bit.
I did say I can't think of a reasonable question they could come up with. Is what I did
Okay,
say.
yeah, fair.
So if they can come up with one, I'd be like, oh, that's a question I'd be interested in looking into.
Sure.
But I can't think of a reasonable one, and apparently neither can they because none of them answered that.
Tried a little bit to poke around with men and women, but honestly,
Did she just affirm two genders?
Damn.
Wow, base.
Indeed.
none of the attempts to sort of compare based on the
The poor non-binaries
demographics
cast into the void with Morgoth.
has shown me any major difference. And of course, if I ever manage to work with someone and we get approval, I would eventually like to rerun this open to everybody, including any religious, philosophical belief, and all of that. Although trying to do that larger scale is rather intimidating. So at this point, I'm not seeing anything, and I would never be able to generate any sort of statistically reliable argument, if that makes sense.
It doesn't.
I think as well.
No, it does. It does
how-
make sense that she can't make a statistically reliable argument.
Okay, that part does make sense. Thank you for the clarification.
Also, great pause.
I've planted two really good ones on this guy tonight.
Yeah, nice.
He's trying to whistle right now.
No, he just makes weird faces when he tries to pronunciate.
This is called the minority whistle.
Okay, sure.
Wide the fandom
Wide.
is as well. The scale of those responses you would need.
He has the permanent
I'm
frown
sure you would
mouth.
need a team to support you.
And at that point, you probably have to rely on some statistical methods.
Yeah, excellent.
Wouldn't they call that the important in bits?
Thank you very much. Right, question number 3. Okay, how might your diverse and nuanced findings in this particular project push back against some of the narratives we have seen propagated recently about non-Catholic or traditional readings of Tolkien being disrespectful and unintelligent?
Well, actually, that's
What?
at the heart of the project.
Yeah, I have no idea. I missed that.
Can you read that back to me?
No.
Like in a way I could understand. Like what
Well,
they
I
just-
also he sort of talked a bit fast at the end. Well,
So you-
maybe I was.
How wide the fandom is as well. The scale of those responses you would need. I'm sure you would need a team
Facial expressions.
to support you.
He's got
And
an
at that point, you
Asmongold
probably
face.
have
Is what he's
to rely on
got.
some statistical methods.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you very much. Right, question number 3.
Here's the question.
Okay, how might your diverse and nuanced findings in this particular
Nuance? What?
Why not? I guess we can throw words around.
I can say a whole bunch of spaghetti words too, and it doesn't mean squat, does it?
project push back against some of the narratives we have seen propagated recently about non-Catholic or traditional readings of Tolkien being disrespectful and unintelligent?
Well, actually,
okay, what?
That's what I-
Non-Catholic and traditional.
Being
There's not-
unintelligent.
Is that not everything?
That's what I don't understand the question. Because it's from a diverse and nuanced point
Mm-hmm.
to non-Catholic, which is everything not Catholic,
Mm-hmm. And
and
traditional,
which
which
could be
is the
anything.
Catholic interpretation, because that's the traditional way to
Well-
look at Tolkien's work.
Well, the traditional, I think, is more of acknowledging that it's not allegorical that he did have Catholic faith, and it was inspired by Catholic faith, but is not allegorical, and thus is not a Catholic direct allegory. It is on his Catholic beliefs. He even admits that, but it's not like it is eventually a Catholic work in its entirety. But it's not like that would be the traditional view, wouldn't it? Like,
yeah,
because he said it exactly what he wanted you to believe it to be, so it makes sense that that's what it is. I'm confused.
I don't know. Let's hear the answer. Maybe it becomes clear.
The heart of the project, because although we've seen obviously a recent explosion of these sort of attacks,
What attacks?
Okay, so there was something in the question about.
Is he talking about Islam? The explosion of attacks?
No, I don't think so.
We've seen a recent uptick of these.
So this is the words is violence type reaction, right? So people saying that, oh, you can't interpret Tolkien in this way because he said these things, blah blah blah, point to the letters.
Oh, so you mean research,
that's an
formulation,
attack,
and all that stuff? Yeah,
because it's words that discount people's interpretation, and of course words are violence, so attack. I don't know, maybe that vaguely makes sense, maybe not, who knows.
my experience as an out atheist queer woman who
it makes more sense now. I mean, the haircut should have given it away, but yeah, I get that.
Well, no, she said that in the beginning as well.
Yeah, I just kind of slipped my mind.
Fair enough.
just recently
I
escaped
think she said she was like former Presbyterian. I'm like, one of those.
from 27 years living in Texas, rural Texas, is that these attacks generally in the US, I can't speak for any other countries, although I'm very glad for the
You can't even speak for the U.S. at this point.
Yeah.
sort of global range that was achieved in the
Also,
survey.
any discussion about Tolkien likely would happen online, unless you go to like a dedicated Tolkien event or something.
There might be like a con or something that you could go to or something.
But not in the US, right?
Well, I mean, we have Dragon Con, which is for like Robert Jordan.
Yeah, but he's a United States person.
Well, yes, but there's tons there's cons in London. There's cons in
London, sure. But I mean,
well, yes, but you also have to remember that Lord of the Rings, or like Tolkien's work, is the largest fantasy thing.
Yeah, okay, sure.
In America, because it influenced everything that followed after it heavily.
I suppose, yeah.
So, I mean, it's super. Like, look at the movies. The movies in America.
The movies are great. Yep, they did well. But yeah, I don't know.
It's spread out. These attacks on atheists, on queer people, have been long-standing in the U.S.
What attacks?
And although we made some,
what
I said, I don't know.
Like, I mean, you being an atheist, are you attacked by anything in Tolkien? Like,
no.
Well, you must clearly be Catholic.
Well, I mean, technically I am.
No, you're a non-practicing. What are you talking about?
Non-practicing, sure, but I mean, you
means
don't
you're
really...
not Catholic. That's code for not Catholic. That's what non-practicing.
No, legally.
There's no legally in religion. That's not how that works.
Yeah, but I think you can't officially leave Catholicism without getting excommunicated.
That's one of the doctrines of Catholicism. That's a very strange one, and we're not going to talk about it. So
yeah, no, but I mean, that's fair.
is after the 70s, there's been such a backlash. So, and what I would hope is
I didn't see anything.
We're talking about backlash. We're talking about attacks. We're talking about things I don't even know what we're talking about because we haven't mentioned what we're talking about. Attacks of what? Attacks on atheist beliefs?
Well, yeah, no. See, atheists are getting murdered in the streets because of Tolkien or something. I don't know.
You know what? completely forgot the great slaughter massacre of the entire
Texas,
United States, life in Texas
Mhm.
because Tolkien.
I
I
also
forgot.
missed that because, of course, I don't live there. So, yeah,
That's why you were spared. Clearly,
makes
if you had
sense.
been here, you would have been wiped off the face of the earth because
Mhm.
you are a terrible existence and plague upon Tolkien, and he absolutely despised you. I know, right? I'm tearing up just at the thought.
And my conclusion when I
By the way, you want to go play some Tolkien games after this?
Yeah, sure.
Every time I kill an orc, I'm like, yes, another atheist gone. maybe that's what she's talking about. Oh my gosh, we
Oh,
completely we forgot with Ring Pop. They're not just black people; they're black people that are atheists. They're
No,
also,
but they worship Sauron, right, don't they?
but
Well,
he's
I don't
not a
know.
deity, though. Remember,
Well,
he's just he's
he's
a
just the
slave owner.
in-between guy between the
He's
orcs
he's,
and
he's the
Morgoth.
slave driver. They just worship. It's that what is it called? Stockholm syndrome. Stockholm syndrome
Yeah,
driver
okay.
of blacks with their apparently white landlord, plantation owner or whatever. And
Yes.
but it's clearly they're atheists and pantheists and agnostics, all those people. Every time an orc is killed, that's the massacre we're referencing. And clearly those things happen in, like, didn't you know Middle Earth was actually Texas, not England?
Wait, what? Oh, damn.
That's where the massacres happen.
Yeah, no, it all makes sense.
All coming together, guys.
all
Yeah.
of
That's
Analysis
obviously why
of
Mordor. Yeah,
people
no,
So when we go play for Battle for Middle Earth afterwards, we're gonna go kill us some atheists, I guess.
they love about Tolkien out of this.
Is that atheist on atheist crime when we have orcs from Mordor fighting orcs from Mordor?
Possibly.
And to top it off, because orcs are black people, apparently, it's black on black crime.
Wait, this just became a bit too real.
Oh, I'm having a psychological breakdown from the realism.
Nothing
Also,
sounds
your screen sort of freezing.
Probably. It's all StreamYards. It's nothing to do with me. My camera and every other processing of any other type of software works perfectly fine 100% of the time. It's literally StreamYard. I also have ridiculously good internet, so it's definitely StreamYard.
different to what I hear in any sort of general fandom space or from any
As long as you're said, that's all I care about. Yeah, visuals is
Okay. Yeah.
academic presentation. So it just may be something along the lines of, gee, we can share this love of this author's work, and we
That
atheists.
implies there is love there.
What?
That does imply that there is love there.
They enjoy the series like everybody else. Nobody gives a crap. Literally nobody cares if you enjoy the series and are LGBTQ or non-religious or non-Christian religious. Nobody cares. Not a single one.
Well, unless you start trying to change it.
Well, I should say no. I specifically said no one cares if you enjoy it.
Okay, no, that's fair. Yeah.
So if you want to enjoy it, you could be a dolphin in the freaking ocean. Nobody cares.
Sorry, what now?
You could be a dolphin in the ocean. Nobody cares.
I can't read.
You can do it through sound, audiobooks.
Yeah, no, I suppose. Yeah.
Are you one of those ableists who's like, dolphins can't hear sounds?
No, they can hear sound.
You know what we're going to do then? We're going to take the sound and translate it to vibration.
Yeah, no, that works because they're illiterate, so they can still hear stuff. Yeah, no, perfectly logical.
Hey, they're intelligent. They can figure it out.
True.
I bet they wouldn't come up with orcs being black people because they're not that stupid.
They would not, because they're actually intelligent. Yes.
Yep, that's the point. So, like, her saying, like, well, we actually love it too. It's like, fine. Love him. Nobody cares if you love him. But if you're coming out with some really hot takes about, like, this is what Tolkien meant, that's a totally different ballgame. That's a totally different ballgame.
Not destroying.
Or lag.
And I sort of saw a comment. I'll note that, I mean, these attacks do exist, they're real. But when I presented this,
disagreements are not attacks. Words cannot hurt you. They cannot literally hurt you.
I was at the New York Tolkien Society and pop culture. A number of people who are Christian or interested in those things in Tolkien have come up to talk about, again, the similarities they see with what my respondents say, and I'm hoping eventually
they actually probably, I can't speak for them since I don't know who you're talking about. They could be wrong, they could be right, I don't know, but they probably did a little bit more research than you.
Possibly, yeah.
Probably. On average, it's probably higher than 50% chance that they did more research.
Yeah, no, that seems reasonable.
I mean, considering you could just go to the books, you can go to the letters of Tolkien.
Yeah, well, you could go back to the books and make an accurate Rings of Power show. What?
I mean, let's not get crazy
Wait a
here.
minute.
Amazon's not capable of accuracy. Let's just say, but like, you can go to the book, like letters of Tolkien, or the history of Middle Earth, or the Silmarillion, the appendices inside the Rings, the Lord of the Rings themselves, the Hobbits, any of the Tolkien Legendarium. You could just go there and line them up. Now, if you're like, well, this one contradicts this, like, no, because one is canon. The other ones were a potential canon that didn't actually pan out, but we still have the works, and they're still enjoyable, isolated to themselves. That's fine. But that it doesn't take much research to get that. Like, I have so many of them. There's more I want to get, but like, you could easily go back to that. They don't want to go back to that because they have ideologies and beliefs. It's like, but these people shouldn't be coming in saying, because I'm Christian, therefore they could say I am a Christian, and despite that, I have this. Because if it offends her that they say I am a Christian, then it should offend everyone else when they say I am an atheist, or I'm agnostic, or I'm gay, I'm lesbian, I'm bi, I'm pantheistic, or whatever. Like, none of that should have anything to do with whether or not the accuracy of the statements. If Tolkien is X, somebody coming in saying I'm atheist and I think it's Y, somebody else coming up and saying no, it actually is X, because all these reasons, they have a freaking slideshow with sourcing and citation. That's how you would know. The rest of it's completely irrelevant. So I wish he had at least one incident. Like, give me a YouTube link to somebody who's attacking you violently for being an atheist, queer, random person, thingy-majiggy, whatchamacallit, thingamabob, doohickey, all the words from Alabama, but like, and Kentucky and Arkansas, but there's a lot of states that do that. But just give me something that I can go watch and be like, oh, okay, so they're attacking you because they hate you because you're this, that, and the other, or because no, they're actually like citing actual Tolkien knowledge type stuff, and it's like, if somebody comes and he says Tolkien was Catholic, oh, that hurts. Tolkien believed this, oh, that hurts. Like, if that's your violence, then I'm sorry, you're going to get assaulted verbally by everybody who speaks the truth. Because
but that's the whole point of the words of violence thing.
The truth is violent. Yeah, I'm sure it is when you live in a la la
That's why
land.
you must censor it.
Doesn't take much. All it takes is to be a quote unquote professor at one of these universities, and there you go. Do that.
Use collaborative work.
Okay. But
I feel like these questions, like all the other questions for the other ones, were just like literally a giant nothing burger.
Yeah. Well.
And no citation or sourcing in any of these.
Well, no, the last one has.
No. I'm saying like in terms of like that were applicable to the actual topic.
Oh, yeah, sure.
She cited and sourced things, but the actual context to which they were cited or sourced didn't make much sense. Like when you say, Turambar slayed wow, I just brain farted. What's the dragon? Glaurung, thank you. So he slayed Glaurung. It's on page blah. And you were like, oh, okay, so if I go to page blah and I find that little piece, that's sourcing and citation, especially if you're talking about, tragedy events or something. And the life of Turambar is probably number one in the entirety of the Tolkien Legendarium. because it's a pretty tragic tale. I mean, there are other tragedies, like obviously the Teleri being wiped out, or not wiped out, but like slaughtered by their kin. Like that's a tragedy, but like Turin is a pretty sad story. It's not just a war; it's a whole bunch of messed up things that destroyed a family, and the family line ended up ending because of that. But besides that point,
that as well. Okay, so I think this is going to be the last question before we have to move on. Now, this question, the question says, to be clear, they're talking about how Tolkien depicts spirituality without worship. So just a kind of a header for this question.
Pretty normally, actually. It's not that difficult to figure out.
Do you feel that part of the accessibility and applicability of Tolkien's work to non-religious or non-monotheist readers can be partly attributed?
Non-monotheist is a really hard way of saying polytheist.
No, but he also said non-religious, so.
I know, but he said non-religious and non-monotheist.
Yeah, but non-religious automatically also includes non-monotheists.
Yes, but he said non-monotheists. Non-monotheists would be polytheists.
Yeah, but those are excluded by the non-religious.
But what? Well, yeah, they are. They're two separate categories. That's why he said two different things.
Yeah, but he put an and instead of an or in between.
I know. But a non-monotheist is a theist that's a polytheist.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. So him saying a non-monotheist is a really weird way of saying polytheist.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
To Tolkien's hesitance.
Like, it's not a square. It's a thing with four corners.
It's a not circle. Yes.
It's a not circle, four-cornered object of all equal dimensions. It's a weird way of just saying a square.
Yeah.
To depict direct religiosity or beliefs and actions directly linked to Christianity, especially in his published works such as The Lord of the Rings. In particular, the questioner is thinking about how Tolkien...
The questioner, you say?
Well, how do you know what the questioner is thinking?
By questioning them for the light.
He just read it and said,
I don't know. I'm pretty sure whoever they asked probably got
Is he a psychic?
He's reading a question. So it's somebody else's viewpoint. They're the psychics. He's not.
Okay, fair.
Tolkien avoids identity.
I see. He's like, safe for now. Whew.
To identifying activities as worship, especially in a Christian context, accepting the actions of men who worship Melkor or Sauron. He explicitly states Númenóreans had no temple until they worshipped Melkor.
Right. Can I just make normal length questions rather than making an entire story around the actual question?
No. I mean, okay, think of it this way. Worship is not the main focus in the Tolkien Legendarium. So why would they need to have...
I think the idea was that they were supposed to have like a natural religion, which would not include the temples and worship, because it's just plainly obvious that the Father exists.
The elves don't worship trees despite singing to them.
Or do they?
They don't.
They don't. No.
That.
But like in modern pop culture, the elves do.
According to... But then you have... Then that's more like Druid, but yes. You don't have... if you have a
Beorning, right? So
if you have a Beorning crossed with an elf, you would technically have a Druid. It's an elf that worships.
And they transform in bears, which brings us straight to Baldur's Gate.
Bears. Beorn can transform into anything. He just chose to pick a bear.
Ah, okay, fair.
He's a skin changer. He's not a bear changer.
Well, maybe.
Come on, I thought you knew your lore better than this. Shame on you. Oh, I'm sorry. Was that too much violence of words?
It was, yeah. I was attacked by a Christian today.
but I'm not Catholic, so I'm not that bad.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Well,
With
who
that,
knows?
I think that's a very good observation. And I mean, when I first read Lord of the Rings at 10 and read Tolkien's quote on allegory, it suddenly made me realize.
so she admits she knows that the allegory is not a part of this whole thing, but then she's going to say it's all allegory. I don't get it. How's that coherent?
Why I was starting to feel uncomfortable with the Narnia.
But Narnia's not Tolkien.
And also, while it is very much obvious that it represents Christianity, and of course Aslan being Jesus, right? Does that really matter to the enjoyment of the story? I mean, if you're a militant atheist, of course, yes.
I mean,
I
I know
guess.
militant atheists who could say they enjoy the story. They don't necessarily agree with the underlying aspects of it, but they can say they enjoy the story.
Well, were they really militant atheists then?
I mean, I don't know. I don't have many friends that are militant atheists, mostly because I only really hang out with intelligent people. But
That's fair, yeah.
I mean, old school atheists are not militant atheists. They at least have decent arguments. It's
Mhm.
different. Another time, whatever.
Allegorical elements. And I know that's complicated and there's fascinating scholarship on it. I was struck by how many of my respondents compared Tolkien's work to Lewis's with being less.
It's almost like they're best friends with
And
different
wow, yeah.
and had different intents for their works, and thus created at different audiences. And it's like there's a whole freaking
Wow.
system, and like
Who would have thought? I actually
it's
still
wrong.
need to finish the Chronicles of Narnia.
Really?
Well,
I
I've
have
only
the
read like the first 5 or so books. I've never
If you want the
finished the last.
audiobooks, if you want the audiobooks, I have the audiobooks. And they
Sure.
might even be dramatized too.
I'm not sure that's a benefit, but
No, it is. They're really well done.
Hmm.
They're
could
not.
be
They're,
interesting.
it's like a BBC production kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
It's good. Let's put it that.
Okay,
It's
fair.
unabridged, good, wholesome stuff. So anyway,
Sort of pushing that at you. So yes, I think there is. I think there's also an element that the work that Tolkien so loved, his medievalist world, the northern elements, the pagan world, that the texts of those times, and I'm not a medievalist, but I talk to medievalists.
No, that's obvious.
They reflected a syncretism of pagan and the Christian beliefs of that historical period. So as far that's why neo-pagan.
honestly, what Matt and us were talking about earlier was the Christians squashed the Norse pagan religion. It's like
Yeah, but
actually,
they
they,
didn't. They
they
didn't.
converted themselves. You know,
Yeah.
about that. It's like, well, they destroyed the Germanic. It's like, you know, the Holy Roman Empire was, you know, Germanic. About
Yeah.
that.
No, but see, like Germanic, I mean the earlier Germans.
So I know the tribal system.
Because the Holy Roman Empire, of course, was conquered from the pagan Germans,
Yes.
who were
But
forcibly converted.
you can't. The forcibly converted thing is silly because you can't forcibly convert somebody.
Well, okay, the pagans were killed if they didn't convert.
Like when the Catholic Spaniards went over to the South America, gathered up all the Aztecs or Mayans or wherever they were at the time, and, you know, poured a bunch of water on them to baptize them. You had literally just thousands of wet Indians. That's all that you had. They
Yeah.
didn't believe anything. Like that's not how conversion works, people. Anyway,
Yeah.
sorry. I really hate people.
Let's call it aggressive missionary work.
Without the missionary work, yes. It's like, look at this aggressive religion. The religion itself is not aggressive. It's literally anti-aggressive. It can't be aggressive. That's why, like, one time I heard Carl Benjamin / Sargon of Akkad talk about how the Crusades were, like, you know,
We're good, actually. Or
were actually good. And it's just like, yes, they're good and whatever, but they weren't Christian. They were, you know, I guess
European.
they were promoted by the church, but it's not a church doctrine. It's not a church demand.
Yeah.
It's not a
No,
church
but
requirement. Nothing about Christianity
obvious, isn't it?
requires warfare against other people. Now, if you say they're European countries that were responding to Muslim aggression
Yeah, because
or
that's what
Islamic
it is.
aggression, that's what it was. Sure. But people are going like, well, they believe the church. Yes, they use the church. They use the religion incorrectly, sure.
Specifically, it was in response to, well, not only the Muslims coming from the east to attack the Eastern Roman Empire,
And south of
but also because in Spain, actually, the Muslims went all the way to France and only got pushed back in France itself. And that made
France.
a whole of Western Europe aware that, wait a minute, fuck.
Wait, just a daggone minute.
This is a very dangerous situation we're in. We need to do something about it.
Well, it wasn't even just like the belief system was at threat. It was the people who ruled those areas. Their rule was at threat.
Yeah.
So they were like, no, I don't want to lose my country. I don't want to lose my kingdom. I don't want to lose my rule and power. So we're going to go fight to push them out so we can retain that. That was what
there was maybe also some slight, of course, the
they might have some
were
religious
seen as,
zealotry.
look, the infidels are coming. We must defend our land, whatever.
Yeah, I get that, but at the same time, it's not like people say it was Christian in nature. It's like it literally couldn't be because nothing in Christianity calls for war or violence.
No, it's just normal human interactions between.
It does, however, to an extent, call for self-defense, but it's not as broad of a term in that regard. It's not like sit there like open your chest up like, come on, take a swing so I can swing back at you. That's not what it is. It's saying like, protect yourself and protect those you care about, kind of thing. The pacifism thing kind of ruined a whole lot of things. I'm not going to go into that. It's a whole other part of history. The point is that people take the religious aspect and then throw it out there like that's what Christianity is. That's not what Christianity is. There's no historical data backing that. There was a lot of corrupted officials inside the church. That's historically documented. It's well known. It's not a secret or anything. You can go to scholarly people and they'll tell you all about it. So the point is that it's not a Christian thing. So you can't be like the Christians are coming after us. It's like, no, if the Christians are coming after you, it's because you're saying something incorrect and they just happen to be Christians who just happen to like this stuff, but whatever.
And some of us who are pagans and Wiccans adore Tolkien because we see the pagan elements.
Feel free. Nobody cares. Not a single person cares.
In it.
And that one guy's going to be like, I care. Like I said, not a single person.
And he did not obviously distrust or dislike them, although there is that one, like pagan kings or something with Denethor's self-immolation.
The people that worship the non-god deity as the deity. In other words, people who raised up Sauron or Melkor were anti-Eru, which would be pagan because they would not be worshiping the actual deity.
Mm-hmm.
That's how you it's not paganistic of like what the pagan, like the Celts would do in their little rituals or whatever. That's not what he's addressing. He's addressing the people in the universe into what they would be worshiping or not worshiping when it is well known the deity god figures of the Valar angelistic type figures and Eru Iluvatar. It's known. It's not like a hidden thing. So the people who didn't worship him but worship something else, aka didn't worship God, they would be considered pagan. Duh. Like, it's not rocket science, people.
But so it's and I know the Tolkien and the pagan seminar got some pushback as well. But yes, I think
all of these are getting pushed back because they're all trash.
I think how
we're living proof. We have to suffer through each of these.
he wrote is obviously
we got like 15 seconds. Let's just get through it.
Affecting readers in ways that are, I think we need more work on why. Yes, heathen kings of old. Thank you. That we need more work like what Sonali is doing, and I know Dawn is doing. We need more work on the people who read and love Tolkien.
What? does that even mean?
Professor Terrence.
Whoa. It means we don't know because we couldn't possibly know because knowing would be intelligence and we can't.
Wow.
But essentially, they want more people to
To do, yeah, that
their
sort of.
paganistic or Wiccan, which is paganistic, or atheistic or agnostic, or their sexual identity or whatever.
Mhm.
That's what they want. That's their goal, which is not a goal really to have. Like, that's saying we want to be represented in his work, but we have to implement our own work into his work for it to be representation. And again, this whole representation concept, and I'm not talking like I go out and daydream about, being Aragorn waving a stick around or whatever, because I'm clearly not Aragorn. But the concept of where I have to personally be represented in the story, like I have to personally be like, I am Aragorn, I am Gimli, I am Legolas, I am Baron, I am, this. You don't have to. You have to be able to identify with the characteristics of them. Like when somebody's like, I'm King Arthur, you're the bad guys. I'm just like, you're not necessarily identifying with King Arthur. You're going like his right to rule or his bravery, his courageousness, his leadership. These are characteristics that anyone, regardless of your ethnic background, cultural background, religious background, or lack thereof, and whatever, like regardless of any of that, you can still relate to the character. A girl can go out and say, I'm King Arthur, because she relates to his characteristics. She's like, I want to be brave. I want to be courageous. I want to fight the bad guy. I want to be just. I want to be merciful. I want to be blah, blah, blah. All the characteristics of King Arthur. That's what she wants to be. She doesn't want to be King Arthur. She doesn't want to become a boy. She wants to be a character that she admires. She doesn't have to be the character and thus see herself in it. The representation are two contextually different things. Because I want to be represented through, I want there to be a humorous character like Matt. I see myself represented through Matt because all of his characteristics are applicable to me. I like to be goofy. I'm mischievous. I like to have fun, joke. I like to do all the fun things that Matt does. I also like the strategy, tactics, and battle stuff. I like those things. I'm a big fan of mercenaries. Go figure. He's a mercenary. Like, these are things I'm like, man, I see a lot of myself in Matt, but I'm not saying Matt is me. But I can go out and dress up like Matt for a con and be like, I'm portraying myself as Matt because I relate the most to Matt. It's not the same thing as, oh, he has the same skin color as me. Oh, he has the same morality structure. Oh, he has that. Like, those aren't relevant. His bravery is the fact that he doesn't want to be in a war, but he's there because he needs to be, and he knows he has to be, and he knows that if he doesn't, somebody he cares about is going to get hurt. I can relate to that. That's stuff that I'm like, yeah, I'm that way with my family. I'm that way with my friends. I'm that way with whatever. Like, they're two very different things when it comes to representation. So the entire thing is just absolutely silly. I don't need to have the person, like, I could relate to the sea folk. Well, they're black people. I'm not black. I'm closest. I know I'm technically sub-African. I mean, to some extent, Sicilians and all that jazz. But it's like,
I don't think sub-African is the correct phrase. But
sub-African. Well, what's the term where we're like roots?
Because I suppose that implies sub-Saharan African, right?
Well, sub-Saharans. Saharan's a specific section of Africa.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Sub-African is not really.
No, I'm just saying, like, we're tied to Africa in a shape or form from our origins. Whatever that.
By virtue of the Arabs that live there.
I guess. But
No, the Arabs invaded Sicily.
They clearly didn't stay.
They didn't stay because then the Normans came and took over Sicily.
With that, you have me feeling.
So you could argue That you're related to the Norse people.
The Norse or the North Africans or both?
Well, both, probably.
So we're African. There you go. It's problem solved.
Yeah, but the North Africans were actually Arabic, not
Well,
African.
They were the
In
rulers
origin.
of the area. They weren't necessarily the only
Yeah, but the Arabs were the only
There
ones
are
who
black.
went
There are
into-
black Muslims of the olden days, so it's not like
Well, black.
Come
I'm not
on.
sure they
Come
fall
on.
into that category.
they're African.
Sure, fine.
I'm just saying. I'm saying. I'm not going to be Jeremy from Geeks Gamers, where he's black from the waist down. But
I mean, it could be. Who knows?
the world may never know.
That's perfectly reasonable to
Assume.
assume.
But my point is like the representation thing is a new concept. It's a modern concept. It's a
Mhm.
very
In my
recent.
opinion, a bit of a silly one as well.
It's not an opinion. It's a fact. It's a silly one.
Well, I mean, sure, maybe. I don't know.
Like being able, like the reason people wanted to hear heroic ballads about Beowulf or other characters because they wanted to hear the great deeds they did. It's like even in Wheel of Time when they hear about the hunt for the horn or the tales of Jane Farstrider or something.
Yeah,
They want,
they want to be a hunter for the horn,
yes,
probably.
but that's the thing is like they want to experience the glories, the riches, be the person who found the horn. Like that's what they want to be.
Yeah.
They don't want to be a specific person. They don't want to relate to them because they have the same skin color or whatever like that. They don't want to have the same gender. Like
Sure.
I can look up to Brigida Silverbow and be like, wow, she's really cool.
Yeah.
Like,
I
but
want
you're
to be
not
a
a
magical
woman.
archer
It doesn't
with
matter.
silver arrow skills, I guess.
I want her archery skills. Yes, I
Yeah.
do. I don't need to be a woman to want that.
Including the exploding arrows, of course, right? That explode ships in farm.
Especially the exploding
Yeah,
arrows.
yeah, of course.
I want to be freaking Rambo all the day. Boom, boom, boom. Invasion USA.
That does sound pretty awesome, yeah.
Yeah, like who wouldn't? I don't have to be a freaking woman for that. Are you freaking kidding me?
Well,
I'm not,
no, you do.
I'm
You
not
do.
close-minded like that.
It's the new rule. You have to be a woman in order to do silver exploding arrows. Yeah.
Why do they have to be silver? Why can't they be black? Why can't they be?
Well, you can do black arrows, I guess, but then you're not.
Then you're an orc.
Yeah. Wait, what?
But anyway, or you're an atheist. That is even worse. But anyway, I guess that's really all the topic is because I mean it's a big nothing. Again, our 7th nothing burger.
Yeah, well, I mean, how many more do we have to go through?
Let me look. I'm gonna look right now. We got
Well, there were
one,
like 15 we had access to. Or was it
5,
14?
we have another 7.
7. Oh, fuck. We're only halfway there.
I mean, I'm trying to decide if any of these actually are not that bad. At least one of them admits it's projecting.
Okay, that's good. I think. Maybe.
God, that one's gonna be terrible. I don't know what that means, but okay. A lot of these are kind of.
By Dana Peterson Deep Roads, or
That one's the one I'm not looking forward to. I was talking about the Joel Mariner one. I don't really understand it. It seems the least offensive.
yeah, it's probably. Yeah, I can see that.
I don't really get what it's supposed to be, but okay. We'll get to it, I suppose. But anyway.
Yeah, next time, maybe.
So thanks everybody for hanging out. Love to hear your comments if you have any on them. I mean, again, it's a giant nothing burger, so there's probably not a whole lot to comment on. But if you'd like to add your opinion, your voice, or whatever to this conversation, please drop a comment down below. If you enjoyed this, I don't see how you could possibly enjoy this, but if you did, like this video.
Yeah, our commentary is enjoyable, maybe.
Our commentary is probably okay. No, it's not probably. Our commentary is way more enjoyable than what the topic is. That's a fact. But if you'd like to make somebody else miserable, send them this video so they can also
Wow, I would not wish that upon my worst enemies.
Yeah, here you go. Send this to your worst enemies and make them suffer. Naked on the sofa. But yeah, love for you guys to help us out by spreading the word, or if you just enjoy Tolkien stuff in general and you want to support the Tolkien side that's not completely off its rocker, we greatly appreciate you. You are appreciated. But yeah, we'd love to hear from you guys and what you thought. Like, comment, subscribe, all that kind of good stuff. Help us out with the algorithm. That'd be great. Some more people could find it. I doubt most people made it to this far to the video, but if you did, you're a champ. You are
Lovely.
the best mankind has to offer. So, thanks everybody.
Kill some bugs. Yes.
And some robots too, automatons specifically. True. But yes, thanks everybody for hanging out. We'll have another one coming out maybe in a week or something. Although there is a time period where we will be taking a week off because I will be out of town. So that'll be fun. I might do something different for that week, specifically because I will be out of town. I think that's in 2 weeks. Let me double check my calendar. Yeah, that'll be 2 weeks. So yeah, in 2 weeks we'll have to do something a little bit different. I might do a smaller video to just give some content and then move on. But yeah, thank everybody for coming, hanging out, whatever. I'd like to do a live stream at some point where we can actually just chat and hang out, but I know those are always really popular. They're not. They're really not. But if you like to just hang out and chat, we actually have a lot of fun with that. We're not recording. We're actually talking about some really interesting, fun stuff. So we might just do a video of that. Because why not? I know Matt wants to do an anime talking thingy, which I don't know what specifically he wants to talk about, but
well, I'm up for that, but I also don't know what he wants to talk about. So
he was not specific. We'll have to talk about it later. But thanks once again, everybody. We'll have some stuff coming out hopefully every week and whatnot. So once again, walk in the light, my friends.
Farewell.